Just you, me, and some flypaper. Oh, and Jack.
Yeah, and some sick bags, presumably.
And some I I tentatively did what I call a sort of edited
I
highlights
was going to say,
review.
did you do a little recce of the film?
I knew I couldn't sit through it beginning to end again. Although I do have enormous admiration for it, but I know my limits.
It's a
And when
strange thing, isn't it? It's like
yeah,
it's one of the best films I've ever seen. It is one of the most
oh, it's an incredible
brilliant
piece of
films I have
work.
ever seen.
Yeah, it's
But
an incredible piece of work.
unlike Alien, it is not a film I revisit often.
My friend, because when I was out in Rotterdam, my oldest friend, who I've known since I was 4 years old,
Wow.
actually lives and works. Well, she lives in Delft and she
Mhm.
works in Rotterdam, and so I met her a couple of times while I was out there, and I was telling her about this, and she
Yeah.
said, and she just said the thing about The Fly is it's just so intensely sad. And I said,
It's
I think that actually
yes.
feeds into it. I said the level of body horror is probably one of the most extreme from an intelligent horror movie. I
Yes.
said, but I think even then I could get round that. I said it's a combination of the atmosphere, and but she said it is just very, very sad watching this man go through this.
That's very
And I
interesting
think
because
that's it.
I was thinking of that exact thing just before we came on. I was thinking about the ending of the film and how it's so desolate.
Yeah,
Like
and she said
nobody
the same
comes
though.
out
She
of
said
this.
I think it's a great film as well. This is my friend Becky,
Mhm.
and she said I think it's a great film. She said, but it's funny. She said you now you've mentioned it. She said I've never rewatched it. And I said, oh well,
Right,
there you go.
right, and
But she made me laugh because she said the weirdly. She said we had a VHS copy of the second movie, with
oh
Eric
yes,
Stoll. She
yeah,
said, but because that was kind of pulpy
yeah,
and a bit daft, she said I'd
mhm,
watched that film endlessly
yeah. It
as a
just
sort
does.
of
I
in
mean,
my teens.
the sequel just doesn't have the weight. And don't get me wrong; it's not necessarily a bad film. It's actually quite
No,
fun. It's a fun
yeah,
sort of schlocky action horror, but
mm,
it just doesn't have the weight or the
no,
gravitas of the original.
no,
And
sadly,
I do think that's it. That's what makes it so grueling. Yeah, visually, it's horrific. I mean, it is one of the most horrific films I've ever seen. But
yeah,
it's the weight of the damn thing, and it's the
mm,
complexity of its emotion as well. It's not
yeah,
just repulsion that you feel; it is this unbelievable desolation. There's nobody comes out of this film with anything.
no.
Everybody has lost not just something, but everything.
And of course, I've had this sort of straight, as you'll know from our chat online, on WhatsApp.
Mhm.
I've had this kind of odd Cronenberg week without quite
Yes,
realising, because
yes.
there I was reading. I went my holiday read obviously was Clive Barker's
Oh,
couple, but I
wow.
haven't read this yet. Do you know how I cannot believe how daft I felt when I because I've never seen
Have you
Nightbreed.
never seen Nightbreed?
And I
Wow.
therefore did not know that one was an adaptation of the other. And
Yes.
because this is my second reading of this novel. I read it maybe 10 years ago,
Uh-huh.
but for some reason Nightbreed passed me by, and actually 1990, yeah, probably would.
Mhm.
I was only 10. Saying
Right,
that though,
right.
I saw the bloody fly.
I was going to
But
say, right.
but I think maybe Nightbreed wasn't. I mean, I don't know. Is it more of a cult film? Was
Yeah,
it?
very
Was it?
much so. It
You're
kind
right.
of fell through the cracks, to be
So it
honest,
would have gone
because
under my radar. And I just
yeah,
think in the intervening years, I just didn't. I knew. Obviously, I know some of Clive. I mean, I know
mhm,
Underworld. Obviously, I know Hellraiser and
yeah.
Hellbound.
Lord of
I didn't know.
Illusions. Have you ever seen Lord of
I've
Illusions?
heard of it, but I've not seen it. But my main portal into Clive Barker's deranged mind
Mm,
is his novels and
yes,
his short stories and his novellas. Um, Obviously, Hellraiser and Hellbound, the
of
films are
course.
pretty totemic. And
Yeah.
again, there's examples of quite big body horror
Pretty
films that I find
extreme body horror,
quite
yeah.
much easier to watch. It is this extra dimension with The Fly. Well, of course, then I realised that David Cronenberg was playing
It's Decker,
Ms.
right?
Decker, but I was delighted to find that Hugh Ross was playing
Yes.
Narcisse, because I was directed by Hugh Ross in a
Oh,
play.
superb.
And I didn't really know he'd had this connection to Clive
Yeah.
Barker, and he's a
Wow.
lovely, lovely guy. Um, he had some really
That's
interesting
amazing.
nicknames to me. But yeah, but he's I think he's still even like connected to, like, I think he will even do like he's done some sort of Nightbreed convention or something,
Yeah.
I think,
Well, there's been talk of bringing Nightbreed back or redoing it forever. Basically,
the crazy thing was, as I was reading it, I thought, "Oh, this is very cinematic. This book."
Oh my God, yeah. I
It had
think
been
it's
made into a
Barker.
film.
Yeah, it's Barker at his most cinema conscious. I think
Well,
that
this is
book.
what I thought. Yeah, because I thought it was so smart the ways that he basically uses a great deal of the context of the slasher movie, the slasher, and then leads the reader into what is basically a sort of gothic, literary gothic.
Mhm.
Then does kind of Orpheus, and then it just flips into something else, and then
Yep.
you're into that thing that can only be described as Barker.
Mhm.
It's so perfectly structured. I mean,
Yeah.
you almost get so many pages in kind of each subgenre, and then they start to bleed together. So, yeah, really enjoyed it. But the lovely thing about it, of course, is as much as I like his books that aspire, I really enjoyed the fact that he did this one in this sort of gloriously pulpy way, this
Yeah.
really unpretentious fashion. It just worked
It
for its
does. It's probably
great
his
fun.
pulpiest book, to be honest,
Mm,
outside of the Books of Blood.
mm.
It just has this tone about it. Like almost everything else that he publishes around the same era has this weight and density.
Yeah,
You know that he's playing with big ideas and stuff like the Damnation Game and Weave World. But
in a way,
this,
it felt to me like it's a strange analogy to make in a way, I suppose, but it's the only one I could think of. It's his Virginia Woolf moment when Virginia Woolf writes Orlando as basically a holiday book, a busman's
right?
holiday, and ends up producing one of her finest works. But
Mhm.
it's so different to things like To the Lighthouse or Mrs.
Yeah.
Dalloway. And I feel like this in the world of Clive Barker. It's very different to say how aspirational like something a Weave World is,
Oh,
for
absolutely, yeah.
uh,
I mean,
uh,
it would function very well visually, wouldn't it? Like, yeah, I know we've got the film, but a comic book would be superb,
oh,
wouldn't it? Like a
yeah,
graphic
it'd be
novel of
such a
this.
great graphic novel. Yeah, it's so visual. I mean, he's so good at visual. Well, actually, sound, vision, and smell.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
an awful lot in this book, which almost again to make another literary connection is reminds me of Oscar Wilde,
Mhm.
particularly Dorian Gray. The big deal made of aromas, scents,
Yes,
odors. I mean, isn't the beginning of Picture of Dorian Gray about the studio, the overpowering smell of roses or something?
that's it.
I
Yeah,
used to
yeah.
know the beginning of that off by heart, but yeah, but
But no, it is very textural, isn't it? It's very
mm.
sensual, as you often get with Barker. But here, it's throughout. It's in almost every scene.
But once I found out Cronenberg was playing
Oh,
Decker in the
so
movie,
good.
I was just like, that's perfect.
Isn't
So I've
that
got to track
just
it down now. I
perfect?
mean, how can you read a book twice not knowing A, it's been made into a film, B, David Cronenberg's like, the
Like in
villain.
it, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and not only in it,
Yeah.
but really prominent in it as well, right?
Wow.
And
What has
so good.
Oh, good, because I mean, I always find him really fascinating in interviews. Anyway,
he's an
he's
odd duck, isn't he? He's very
yeah,
interesting. He's
he's
very
very watchable
intense. He's
as a
very
sort of real
intense.
human being. Yeah, but intense. But there's a really interesting wry quality to him as
Hmm.
well. His intensity is offset by this. He very gently plays with interviewers. It's not
Yeah,
cruel, but he works them in
he
very very
does. He seems
subtle
to come at
ways.
them. He seems to operate from the understanding that they're not going to get it. They're not going to understand what his films are actually about. So he's just going to run with what they say. It's like,
He's just
well,
very
yes,
courteous about it as
yeah.
well, because I did watch an interview with him around the time of The Fly, a French interview, I think, where
Mm.
he's trying, and of course, it's very much in that period, post Video Nasty, pre Tipper Gore, where they're hitting him with all the questions. Does it need to be like this? Does it
Yeah.
need to be this graphic? Does it need to be? And his way of dealing with them is sort of uber polite,
Mm.
and all the while pointing them at like not giving an inch, saying, no, it absolutely has to be this way.
Yeah.
But also pulling them into how this isn't a film that is purely superficially about,
Oop,
you know,
oops.
those kinds of simple pleasures.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, so yeah, he basically trying to say to them that it's not puerile, it's not
Mm.
for the sake of the gore. or
But I
of the
did think while
history.
watching him, I thought you would actually probably make a very good political diplomat in that
Mm,
you are intense and you are serious, but you are
mm.
also quite wry, and you're
He's
very,
quite
very good at
articulate as
making.
well.
Yeah, you're making very good at making sort of pulling out the limitations of the interview questions, while at the same time not actually directly making the interviewer feel like an idiot.
Yes, yeah. He's kind of the opposite of David Lynch in that regard. I mean, I
Yeah.
adore watching Lynch being interviewed
You
because
prepared to explain that? No.
no, no, no.
Lynch toys with interviewers like mice with like cats with mice,
He
doesn't he?
does. He
He's
really
amusing
does.
himself with them.
I mean, it's that infamous one, isn't it, where you have the American interviewer saying like, "You said that Eraserhead was your most spiritual film. Do you care to elaborate on that?" And Lynch just goes, "No." And
Well,
it's
he
just
did
dead
elaborate on
air.
it. It's the
Yeah.
movie. That's
Yeah.
Right.
He did-
That's the elaboration, right? That's the
yeah,
expression, yeah.
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 Man.
But
Love them
also,
both. Love
why?
them
Of
both to
course, it
bits.
doesn't have to be like that. Nothing has to be like anything.
Right, right, but that's
If
what it
people
is, yeah. That's
people
what's
want to
been
watch,
created.
if people want to watch gory movies, then those movies have to be gory because that's what
Yes.
people want to watch.
Absolutely, yes.
Within reason, you can apply that generally. There are certain things that we shouldn't make because people want to watch them, clearly. But if you're not actually hurting real people in the process, which plenty of these movies, movies generally have done that. They have actually hurt real people in the process of being
Some
made.
of them have,
People
yes.
people seem less bothered by that mysteriously than
Yeah, isn't that
the fact that
interesting?
what's on the screen is shocking to them.
Well,
You,
he did say
you,
the
you often
interview.
get that like built into censorious movements, don't you? So if you look at like Mary
Yeah.
Whitehouse's crusade, for example, in this country, through the 1980s, the whole video nasty scare, they were very pro-war. That
Well,
movement
this is
was
the point
very
that
pro-war.
Cronenberg made in this French interview, because he was obviously getting that angle foisted on him, and he said, there are things that I struggle to watch. Remembering, of course, this is 1986. I struggle to watch children in Beirut being shot and blown up. I struggle to watch, the news, but I've never heard yet a journalist or a broadcast, representative broadcast news being hit with these kinds of questions. I am making fantasy.
Yeah, this is an excellent point. This is an excellent point, especially at that time in the 1980s, when you are getting like the very earliest fully televised wars going
Yeah.
on. Where
yes.
people are
Where it
actually
gets
starting
very
to see
Bourgeois,
consequences of
isn't it?
war. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And
Kind of what Oliver Stone points out in Natural Born Killers, and that's a movie with lots of problems, but I think it is generally speaking a very interesting film. And you get to the end, and he cuts to the newsreel footage of the at the time very topical events, the OJ trial and the Rodney King beating, and he's telling you, and it seems. I think it is a bit sophomoric in some ways. It is kind of reproaching you for wanting to watch the thing that he's just served you, but at the same time he is, I think, making the point that we just are animals that are just on an animal level. We are attracted to this sort of imagery. We just are.
Yeah,
and it's pointless trying to
it's
deny
got to
it.
go somewhere. It's got to go somewhere.
It's pointless trying to deny it, and it's pointless, and especially if we don't do anything about, a social system that we live in that relentlessly exploits that frailty in our brains, that frailty in the slightly more evolved chimp brain that makes us go, oh, an exciting dramatic thing happening to somebody's body, I must watch that. We live in a society that ruthlessly exploits that for its own gain, and if we're not prepared to do something about that, then we shouldn't be moralizing about the fact that we tell stories.
Yes,
absolutely. Absolutely.
This is not an argument that I would make without acknowledging that it's much more complex than this, but just for the sake of being concise, one could argue that pop culture at its best mops up those things about ourselves that would be best not played out in the theatre of reality.
Absolutely, yeah.
That it actually fulfills a function. Now, of course, it's somewhat more nuanced than that, but just as a kind of way in to understanding that pop culture can do.
Surely that is. I mean, if you want to have a perfunctory explanation or justification for any kind of imagination or imaginary exercise, then surely that's it. I mean, personally, I don't think it requires that. But if like mainstream popular culture, wants that answer, then there it is. It allows horror in particular. It's allowing you to explore something that you can't in waking life. It's a kind of nightmare, right? It's a waking nightmare. It allows for the processing of something on a conscious level that otherwise would be sublimated and would come out elsewhere, right? And for the exploration of ideas. That's something that Cronenberg, in particular, creators like Cronenberg, really understand. It's what it's for, right?
And if you want, and again, just to be puerile, if you want a great link between David Lynch and David Cronenberg and The Fly,
barring their names,
they both had 2 pivotal scripts in their careers given to them by Mel Brooks.
yeah, of course, because apparently the script of The Fly was very different by all accounts. Yeah,
as did the screenplay for The Elephant Man. Of course, that's a Mel Brooks production. There's more to Mel.
yeah, that's why it's Brooks Films on the credits, because he actually said himself. Apparently, Mel Brooks said, "You can't put my name on it because people will get the wrong idea. My name
apparently
has a certain
meaning."
I think it's like Young Frankenstein or something, like a parody of the 50s Fly,
Although according to Cronenberg, the only thing left of the original script is like one line of dialogue or something to that effect.
Oh wow!
It was rewritten extensively.
Well, he took the job on the proviso that he got to rewrite the script.
Yes. Which, I mean,
and he
obviously
certainly did that.
Oh my God! Obviously, that was just an amazing move. Because what's produced it's epoch-makingly good. It's something else, this film.
I love the fact that he said that part of his motivation was being somewhat irked as a child watching the original film.
Oh, the Vincent Price one.
And sort of going along with it, enjoying it for what it was. But at the end, he said, I couldn't get out of my head how frustrated I felt that but this is a kid as well, Cronenberg Jr., they had missed a trick by structuring the plot so that the heads are swapped, effective, crudely speaking.
Yes.
So we can't hear what him. We can't get inside his despair, his psychology, his hope.
Right.
And he said, and I still and getting the screenplay reactivated that thought. Is like, I can finally do it. I can finally tell the story that as a child I kind of wanted it to be, which is we have to be able to hear this man.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. I mean, like, it's innate to the subject matter, for one thing. It really is about, I mean, it is innately body horror. Even the original, even though it doesn't necessarily go as far or as deep as this one, it is about a man transforming into something else. But what the original doesn't do, which this goes for in a very, very deep way, it doesn't look at the existential crisis at all. It's just about the horror of a fly with a man's body, or a fly with a man's head. Yeah. That's about it. There's really not much to the original, barring the obvious draw factor of Vincent Price. Whereas this version of that story, it's all about how we relate to our bodies and how bodies inform identity and the existential crises that come as a result of being these masses of biological matter that have aspired to a state of consciousness through some quirk of evolution. And what a fucking horror that is. Well, how awful that is.
That finally a strain of cinema, the part of cinema which was usually fantasy or horror, science fiction, which was basically just pushed into being B movies, sometimes superior B movies, but just sort of relegated to being. Finally got the chance to grow up, because of course obviously in this decade, slightly before as well, if you take into account things like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 78 film, you've got the remake of The Thing from Another World, you've got This is where this particular genre finally gets the chance to come of age.
You've got a spate of these remakes in the 70s
and they're really
and 80s.
important remakes, and they're necessary remakes. I mean, I think
they're
it's really
important
easy.
films.
I'm one of the first people who goes, "Oh my god, not another remake, not another reboot." But this is different. This was timely. This was the point where these basically juvenilia, really, these rather sort of sensationalist drive-in features were suddenly approached by people who had grown up on them being drive-in features, rather like Cronenberg or whomever, Cameron, and just went, no, there's intelligent stories to dig into here. We can redo these and keep all the thrills, keep all the horror, keep all the
absolutely.
But all three of them are such intelligent remakes, and they're among the best films of their long decade as well, without a doubt. The Thing, this, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
Particularly with science fiction in this era, the 70s and 80s, the cinema science fiction of that era, even the stuff that isn't direct remake, it's definitely riffing on these movies from the 40s and 50s that were the exciting films that this generation of filmmakers watched, maybe at the cinema, maybe on very early television when they were growing up. We talked about the fact that John Carpenter refers to The Thing and Forbidden Planet in Halloween.
Of course,
this is before he does the Thing remake. We even talked a little bit about what Alien owes to predecessors. It owes a little bit to things like Quatermass and the Pit, but it definitely owes to things like The Thing from Another World and Forbidden Planet and things like that. And of course, famously, you have Star Wars, which resurrects the dead style of space opera, riffing on things like Flash Gordon and so on. These old B movies and B features and schlocky horrors that were treated with a great deal of contempt in their own moment, to be honest. These seem to have been the films that sparked the imagination of cinematic artists who then, got in, the ones that got in, wanted to go back to these things that had really sparked their imagination. And I think there's a wonderful confluence of moment and personnel, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And of course, they do something that even we've talked about as well. Jack and I have talked about when now I think, where you have a text that you love, but you can, where it doesn't go far enough, or where it's a bit flawed, or it's only that, and you want to get in there and move it all around. And these guys
talked about this with Hannibal,
these guys got the chance to do that. They got into texts they loved for what they were, recognizing their limitations and how they were treated by, say, a studio or a cultural moment, and gone, right, I'm going to get inside this, and I'm going to pull out why this is necessary, and how it only needs a few things moving around for it to achieve greatness and transcend its genre, while still at the same time not being part of the issue, which is these genres are alien and not important. Because I think the genius of this film and others like it is they do transcend, but at the same time they're saying this is an important this acts as an important metaphor, but it is also, it's a worthwhile genre.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It takes
just has to be treated with respect.
It takes itself very seriously without being toe-faced, without being pretentious. It's wonderful.
Completely.
The way the film introduces its ideas are beautiful, I find. It's so elegant. They're either in the very natural dialogue between the characters, and even that, the communication of ideas between the characters is gorgeous. I love the sequence where Seth he's demonstrating to Ronnie what he's done, what he's created. And he says to her, because she's not getting it, but he says to her, actually, you are getting it. You do understand, but it's taking you a while to catch up because it's so epoch-making, what I've done. Your mind is telling you, no, this cannot be.
Screenplay, it's absolutely beautiful. And I've got to credit him, because he does write a mixture of very naturalistic dialogue, but also very image-strewn, lyrical, metaphorical dialogue, which could very easily have become too much. It could have become pretentious, and yet and it's also credit to the actors that he
Oh
cast.
my God.
They deliver it with such conviction.
It's, I mean, some of it is on page, but my God, this is an example of the director and whoever did the casting taking a lot of the work and the burden off of themselves, right? By just casting the right people. There is something so beautiful about the performances here and the chemistry. I mean, the chemistry between Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis is obvious because they were actually partners at the time, right?
They were lovers at the time.
They were lovers at the time.
Film, didn't he? He championed her for the part, I think.
Yeah. But neither of them were first picks.
No, they weren't.
And it's ironic. I mean, I think they considered various people for Seth Brundle. One of them was Malkovich. And,
one of them was
but
Malkovich,
it's one of those. But he didn't want to do the makeup. But we ended up, of course, with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, and it's almost a three-hander. This movie. There's basically only three main characters. In the entire thing.
Interior. It almost feels entirely inside as well.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where the cast comes about by accident, but it just feels perfect, and it's almost impossible to imagine this film with anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it is impossible to imagine Seth Brundle as anyone but Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
And it is one of the most nuanced and beautiful performances he ever gives in his life. I mean,
it's a fabulous performance.
It's so wonderful. He is very neurodivergent coded, and in a very sincere way. It's not like those awful television shows and movies that we get at present. Not to be too old man about it, which are so exaggerated and distorted and make a thing of the neurodivergence. But he has these wonderful sort of autistic tics about him, which are so beautiful and so sincere, but he's also such a complete character, Seth Brundle. Such a complete character. I love it. I love it too. I just like these characters. Just having these characters in like their soap opera romance is wonderful. Seeing them interact beyond anything else.
You have to love him so that the film has this terrible sadness about it.
Yes.
I was saying desperately sad film.
Well, you've hit upon the thing we were talking about just as before recording started. I was saying to George that I caught up with my oldest friend. I've known her since I was 4 years old. I went to Rotterdam earlier in the week. She lives in Delft, but she works in Rotterdam, and we met up. And
she lives in Delft. That's fabulous.
Oh, it's
lucky her.
I went there. Looked at the Vermeers. And it's wonderful. Delft is what
lucky bastard.
What I know. Delft is what Amsterdam was. That's how it feels. It's not being smothered in the same way that Amsterdam has, because of it's so geared towards tourism. Delft is lovely, and Rotterdam I very much enjoyed. But I met up with her and I was telling her about I'm going back and I'm doing this podcast, and we both had the same response, that we'd both seen it once, not together, but we both seen it once and never watched it again. And she said exactly what you just did, Jack. Said the reason is, my friend Becky said, is yes, it's very graphic and it is a bit stomach churning. She said, but it is just so profoundly sad to watch this.
That's what stays with you. That's what stays with you. I saw this when I was ridiculously young. I was like 12 or something when I saw this.
Likewise, very young.
And it was on TV, I think, or it was VHS rental. I don't know. If it was on TV, I probably saw a Bowdlerized version. I don't really remember. Anyway, I remember being very distressed by a couple of moments of gore, most particularly, oddly enough, the broken bones.
Me too.
The broken bone during the arm wrestling sequence. I did not like that even a little tiny bit. But it wasn't. I don't think of this as a gory film. If you say to me Cronenberg's The Fly, my first reaction is not, oh, that's so gory, or oh, the blood and guts, or even, oh, the makeup or the monster effects or anything. As wonderful as all that stuff is, my reaction is just, oh God, that film's so sad.
So tragic.
That film's sad. I watched this a week ago for this, and genuinely, it haunts you. This film, it keeps coming back to you. I've been thinking about it almost, well, not non-stop. Obviously, that would be a ridiculous exaggeration, but it keeps coming back in little stray moments. I remember things.
I was saying to Elliot in the pre-chat that this is one of the best films I've ever seen that I very rarely watch. Like very rarely. It's not like Alien, which I can go to anytime and just absolutely adore.
I
This
admit I
film,
had to do the edited highlights because I
yeah.
watched it. I mean, I watched it many years ago. I was too young. My dad did his classic, which was The Fly. That's that old B movie they've remade, and sat down and watched it with me at ridiculous. It made my mum very annoyed, and
she wasn't a buzzkill, was she?
Oh no, that's getting edited out.
If you edit that out, I'm quitting the podcast.
But you trotted out his usual excuse. Well, it's much better for him to watch it with us than what. But anyway, and then I watched it one more time. I mean, I was in my 20s, so that's going back a bit. So this time I had to watch the edited highlights because I do remember watching in my 20s and thinking the same thing. Intensely sad, but it also has a very heavy atmosphere. It is grueling, but it is not always, as you say, it is not always the gore that is grueling. It's everything from the way it's lit, the way it's scored. The fact that it is so interior, it feels very claustrophobic. Even when they do go outside, it's sort of fleeting.
Yes, and it's going for something very particular. Yeah, it is, and it's attacking something very particular and universal in humanity. It's basically throwing up in front of you what's going to happen to
that could be edited out.
What's going to happen to most of us. Most of our bodies are going to betray us at some point. We're all going to get some kind of sickness. We're all going to age. We're all going to decay, and it just throws it up in front of you and says, "Look, this is." Well,
you guys said this when I was already cocooned, and you guys had to continue the Alien chat without me because I have to be up so early the next day. I did listen to the end of it, and you guys were saying about how the film does start to point towards us being rotting husks, imprisoned in our meat forms, as I think Jack's direct quote, which I rather liked. Basically we break down, and I just thought, I remember listening to it before we'd even decided on the fly, thinking, oh my God, even in one's 40s, all the signs are asserting themselves. My eyes are weakening, my bladder gets me up in the night, my knees give me jolts of pain when I least expect. I can't sleep like I used to. And this film really cuts to, I mean, I think even if you took away the fly component, if this were a film about a man who discovered a system of teleportation, and just that process seemed to be initially a panacea and then proved not to be, and it just caused an accelerated decay.
Yeah, we're on the same track here, to be honest, Elliot. Yes, this is exactly it, right? It brings up the teleporter problem, doesn't it? But it does it refines it somehow. There's a version of this film where the fly doesn't occur, where there is no imperfection, there is no contaminant in the process whatsoever. But what emerges on the other side is not the original. Even then, well, it's not, that wonder. It's not. No, this is the thing. The film actually acknowledges it. It's in the dialogue of the film. There's that wonderful subplot, that theme that Cronenberg introduces, which is very 1980s, because of course you're getting the explosion in technology. Computer technology is starting to develop and become mainstream at this time. So there is this wonderful thing where the whole process is controlled by computer. It's a kind of AI by a computer. It's an AI algorithm, isn't it? Basically, that Seth has to program.
He even talks about it like it's
almost, and he almost gets there. There's that wonderful scene where where they teleport the steak as an experiment.
Yes, that's key. That's so key.
So key. He talks to her about how the reason the steak that she doesn't like the taste of, that doesn't taste of anything, is like that, is because that's the computer's impression of the steak based on what information and context he's given it. But if he gives it...
She specifically says when she tastes the teleported steak, she says that it tastes synthetic.
Synthetic, right.
It's literally a machine produced replica of a steak.
Seth almost gets there. He's going through, you can see that he's going through the thought process in his own mind as he's articulating, and he's talking about, it's very Cronenbergian, he's talking about how the reason for that is because he hasn't provided the contexts necessary for the computer to understand what the impression of the steak is, what the poetry of the steak is.
It's crazy for flesh. The parts have to be crazy for flesh.
But he stops short of really acknowledging what the existential crisis that introduces is.
He thinks it's possible. He thinks it's possible,
right?
He thinks he just hasn't found the right prompt,
the right language. Yes, he thinks he hasn't found the right language to express to the computer. That's not it.
Because it's a fundamental mistake, and this is where he ends up being a reductionist scientist rather than what he believes he is, which is a kind of philosopher.
Yes, ultimately, whatever, it's not a transportation process. It's a disintegration and therefore a destruction. And then it's a copier, but it's an imperfect one. What it puts together on the other side, if it's the impression that the computer, if it's limited by the computer's contexts, then whatever's reproduced on the other side is never the original. Doesn't matter what you give
isn't it? When you watch the film and take that on board, one of the key things in the moment when he decides to do it is he's angry, he's bitter, he's a bit paranoid. His
worst.
Jealous.
So even if the fly didn't get in there, it's perfectly possible to believe that what emerges is that particular copy, that particular reduced version of Seth.
Exactly, because where does the computer draw the line between discrete entities?
Yes,
it is capable of noticing the distinction between Brundle and Housefly, right? Yes. When they're both in the teleporter. But what about the bacteria in Seth's
Yes. Right. What about the chemical differences
that he's got in his bloodstream?
Yeah, what about like the chemical differences between one state of mood and another? How are they not different states of Seth
What
Brundle,
about the alcohol in his bloodstream and his neurology at that moment?
Yes.
And every parasite that exists on his eyelashes and in his mouth and in his stomach lining.
The fusion with the fly aside, it does seem.
What about the baboon hair on his jacket? Come on. What it's doing, the computer, he's taught it to play a sort of idiot version, and he even repeatedly talks about computers being idiots. You have to tell them.
Yeah.
He's taught it to play a very crude version of Wittgensteinian language games.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's taught it a very crude version of family resemblances. So it is aware enough of the resemblance between one living organism and another living organism to say, that one over there is Brundle, that one over there is Housefly. But it hasn't got any other context. It hasn't got any other understanding. If we're going to try and make sense of this, it interprets any other living things that might be on Seth Brundle at the time. And we're all, I'm sorry to have to break this to you folks, but we're all covered and crawling in the living things all the time that aren't us.
All the time. Them. Yeah, we're giant walking cemeteries,
Absolutely.
Every breath is a genocide. Every heartbeat is a genocide.
Yeah, don't let it bug you, but that's
but even
don't fly off the handle.
Oh, very good.
At me about my puns.
But even the fact that cells are breaking down and dying, and new parts of the body are forming on the micro level and on the genetic level, even at the brief moment he's in the pod, the computer's got to deal with all this.
Yes, right.
Or rather, it doesn't deal with all this.
It doesn't.
Exactly. It just doesn't. Right. There is no guarantee, and the film is smart enough, because it is Cronenberg. It's kind of smart enough to acknowledge this in such a way that it doesn't impose it. It doesn't become egregious. It floats it on the language as a kind of it's an implication in between the gaps in the things that aren't said.
Well, he explodes it out, doesn't he? He uses that, he implies what we've just discussed, because his film is ultimately saying, are we ever the same from
second to second?
To bodily change, from one alteration in our brain chemistry to the next? We
What
have the
is-
illusion of a narrative,
Yes.
of continuity in our lives. We have memories,
That's it.
unreliable as they are. But, our bodies change more slowly than Seth's, obviously for the most part. But that can be accelerated by disease, of course, and towards end of life. But it's, or for example, if a person's impregnated. But it's basically saying telepods or no telepods, we are not permanent. We only decay. We transform all the time. There's no adequate measure by which we can be sure we are properly whole. This film is about the fragmented human.
Yeah, it's totally existential, isn't it? It's totally existential.
Very failure of the computer with its literal contextless reasoning that causes the whole problem. It's the failure of the computer to understand precisely that. It's the failure of the computer. Ironically, what it seems like it's doing on the surface is that it's mixing two discrete animals into one animal. What it's actually doing is failing to notice the distinction.
Yes.
Because it thinks, well, this is just something in the process, isn't it?
That's it.
That's what it thinks.
And therefore, the film ends up becoming interestingly quasi-spiritual in the sense that it's like, maybe we are more than just data, hey, folks?
That does seem to be an implication, doesn't it?
You can't just break
but it's
life
very
down to constituent parts. It's too... I mean, it's almost like a Victorian notion of science.
It's kind of like old alchemical notions, isn't it? What constitutes a human?
You can't pin the fly to
the
and just examine it under a microscope. There's all the other thing. Well, it's like when we talk about I don't know. It's like when we talk about the sea. What is the sea? Well, you can talk about it in terms of its chemical composition, the molecules, but it's also a social place. It's where shipping takes place. It's where people have pleasure cruises. It's where people swim. And then that leads right back to Jack mentioning Wittgenstein then, and it's like, and in fact, all the philosophy of language. Suddenly everything becomes so much more complex, and a computer hasn't got a hope in hell's chance.
And the reason the computer hasn't got a hope in hell is because it's also a failure on Seth's part. It's a failure on humanity's part.
Yeah.
Because it's because of the way we perceive ourselves. It's because of the way we perceive our function within time, and that illusion of continuity.
That's another thing. Temporality.
Well, just on a cruder level, Seth makes the mistake of thinking that he can get the computer to think. He's making the same mistake that people are doing now with AI, where they're suffering from pareidolia, and they're looking at this mechanism and talking about how it feels and how it thinks and how it's got a survival instinct and all this nonsense. It's a computer program. It's not alive. But Seth repeatedly talks about and thinks about the computer as if it's alive. And that's the root of the problem. The root of the problem is that he thinks it's just another kind of mind.
Yes, another consciousness.
All he has to do is get it to think in the right way, and it'll do what he wants. Well, that's his catastrophic mistake, because he can't get it to think at all. All it can do is try desperately to, and even I'm doing it now because I'm talking about it trying to do things. Computers don't try to do anything. They're metal boxes full of electromagnetism. But all it can do in a metaphorical way is to try to do its best version of monkey see, monkey do. It's just trying to copy and interpret what he's telling it. And what he's telling it is he's telling it to do something that is just fundamentally not within the capability of a thing that isn't alive. So it's trying to interpret life. This is a very spiritual film. It's very definitely not a Cartesian film, though, because this is completely opposed to the historically very recent idea that you have the mind and you have the body and they're separate substances. The mind sort of lives inside the body. This is much more in tune with a much more ancient understanding, which is that we have the kinds of minds that we have because of the kinds of bodies that we have. And that's
very much
there's something Wittgenstein brought back as well, actually. Wittgenstein, that's what the whole sort of if a lion could talk, we wouldn't understand him thing is referring to. This film understands that if you have a different body, you are fundamentally a different person.
You are fundamentally a different creature,
you have a different mind. Brundlefly has a fundamentally different mind to Seth Brundle, because it is not Seth Brundle. It is a different organism.
Yeah, and he wrestles with that. He wrestles with that existential conundrum, doesn't it? It's why you get those brilliant, like, he's talking to Ronnie ostensibly, but he's actually talking. He's sort of externalizing what's going on in his own head.
Well, he talks about Brundlefly in the third person, doesn't he?
He does,
yes.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant that he talks about Brundlefly in the third person, because he still thinks, even if he intellectually knows this isn't true, he still feels like he's Seth Brundle.
Yes.
So he talks about Brundlefly like it's this other thing, whereas no, you're Brundlefly.
You are
Seth Brundle is the one you need to be talking about in the third person.
Yes, because Seth Brundle doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, Seth Brundle doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. You can literally say the Seth Brundle we meet at the beginning of the film is destroyed the first time. That's it. And that's why I think it's interesting how the film manages to somewhat imply that the replica, the copy, the computer generated fleshy version that reemerges before the fly DNA starts to assert has all those dominant emotions that he went into the teleporter. It's the only ones it could read. It couldn't read it couldn't read everything else going on, because those were smothered by his state of mind at the time, because the something can't really do what he thinks it can do.
The copy is aggressively masculine and show-offish and predatory and mean in a way that the old one wasn't. He is fundamentally changed, or as I say, this is a new version extrapolated from the drunk, jealous, angry version that went through the telepod. And that's when you get to the section of the film where it looks like a metaphor for drug addiction, where he keeps going through the pods because he thinks that he feels great as far as he's concerned, and so he thinks it's the pod doing it, all that stuff about the plasma pool, and it starts to look like he's on coke. He's very, very much like an 80s guy that's on heroic amounts of coke at that point in the film.
Sugar acts as a kind of
as a metaphor.
But it's also powerfully about patriarchy as well, isn't it? I mean, when he comes, as you said, when he comes through, he is the very archetype of toxic masculinity, because it is him at his worst. But it's as though the copier, the teleporter, has read that as baseline. That's just
that I think is why the character of Stathis is so crucial to the film.
He's so interesting, isn't he?
Yeah, because he's such an. I mean, firstly, I only noticed this time round. They have the same initials: Seth Brundle, Stathis Borans.
Oh, I did not notice that. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm sorry.
An obvious deconstruction, don't they? I mean, Veronica's lover, the successful editor of that science journal, disintegrates into the most in the most toxic way after she leaves him. I mean, in terms of his personality, I mean, he's fucking horrible.
Oh,
and then he basically calls her a whore, and then everything about him comes
her
apart.
Space, absolutely.
He's a proto-stalker.
Well, he's a monster under the surface as well. Stathis is a monster under the surface, as Seth will be revealed.
And
he's there to
in Seth as well. Just very quickly, and then please carry on. I'm being very rude.
No, you're not at all.
The one thing that, because I know I'll lose this if I don't say it now, the thing is about Seth, I agree with everything that you've said, and he is very likable and all these things and what he emerges. But there is something even in the initial stages where you get these little clues about his personality, and his overlap with Stathis isn't entirely invisible. I mean, when he's talking to Veronica near the beginning, I mean, he doesn't say, "I'm working on something that I hope will be helpful to mankind." He says, "I'm working on something that will change the world and life as we know it." He's already a bit of a science jock, or a wannabe science jock.
And also, it's a pickup line,
really
isn't it? It's a pickup line,
and it's a pickup line.
He spills all the beans about the telepod, which he almost immediately realizes that he shouldn't have done, because he's trying to sleep with her.
Because he's trying to sleep with her. Yeah, there is something very interesting about the relationships all the way through, because they're entirely transactional. They're very 1980s. They're very capitalist in that regard. Ronnie's after something. She's ultimately after something. She wants, she's intrigued because she thinks she's going to get a great story out of this. There is something very mercenary, at least initially, about all of this.
Although there's something that conditions that, which is Stathis, because I think it's kind of implied that she wants a big scoop, because she wants to get out of
Yes.
that job. She wants to
Yeah.
get away from him.
And
She is
ultimately,
still
getting away from him, she's a woman operating in this very masculine area, this very patriarchal area, which is like news reporting, right? Media. He
yes.
needs to do this stuff. In the
And she has to
1980s,
navigate
she
these two
needs to
men.
do this stuff to get ahead, right?
I mean, it could be argued that she is the real subject of the film. I mean, she's at the core of it. I mean,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
it's rather, as we were saying, albeit different to the way it manifests in Alien, that, you know, this is about a woman dealing with this sort of these two entitled men, quite toxic men, certainly one very explicitly toxic and one more implicit. In a rape culture, she has to process and deal with all their insecurities, their attempts to own her, humiliate her.
Yeah.
I mean, she is Wendy Torrance, she is Ellen Ripley.
Yeah.
She's part of that select group of leading women in characters in films in this decade again, which quietly, because, you know, Hollywood still mostly about its male stars, but quietly seems to restructure the narrative to throw light on what really is the true horror of these horror films, that this is a woman trying to make her way through the labyrinth of patriarchy. Ellen is, Wendy is, Veronica is, and there's always a hairy great bull at the heart of it ready to attack her.
Yeah.
I mean, even when he comes in and he violates her apartment and says, "I came in to shower, I was feeling scuzzy," and it's like, oh god,
there is something fundamentally weak about him that makes him kind of inherently non-threatening, though, isn't there?
Yeah.
Even at his worst, I don't think she ever takes him seriously as a threat to her safety.
She's never afraid of him. She's never afraid of him in the way that she is of Brundlefly or of Seth, you know.
Yes, he's kind of a buffoon, isn't he?
Yeah. The interesting thing about that is that he turns out at the very end to be really very brave and very strong,
heroic and self-sacrificing.
Yeah.
But of course, he does have to
come through at the end. He saves her. He does really well under horrifying circumstances.
Yes,
so it's not actual weakness. It's that there is just something at the core of Stathis Borans, as toxic and awful as he undoubtedly is, that won't cross that line, and she knows it.
Yeah, the things that are awful in Boris are the things that are awful in Patriarchy ultimately. But there's something else there. He's not just that. He's more than what Patriarchy would have of him. You know, as an entitled little boy that feels that it has fundamental right to the spaces and the company of any woman in his life. There's something else. There's something better trying to get out.
Yeah. And yet the film refuses to go too easy on him because he's always wrong about everything. When she finally decides to get the abortion, he suddenly has second thoughts. And he says, no, I think we should talk about this. It's like he can't help himself being wrong. And the whole thing at the end happens because Brundlefly overhears their conversation outside, which only happens because he decides to start kvetching at that moment.
Yeah, because at that point, Brundlefly has decided that she should go, right? He's told her explicitly.
I love that moment because that's the moment when the last real trace of Seth Brundle dies. It's his last human act, isn't it? Because he knows what he is becoming, what's about to happen. And the last sort of trace of Seth Brundle tells her to go while it still can. And that's really the moment where, I mean, he dies repeatedly in this film, but that's the moment.
Many times. I love the existential quandaries that this brings up as well. I mean, like, you know, the notion of the fly itself. A fly doesn't. I mean, and it doesn't. The film isn't like too heavy on the exposition. You just have these wonderful momentary thoughts coming out of Seth Brundle as he's turning into this creature, as he's decaying before your eyes. But a fly, an insect, doesn't concern itself with what a fly is, or what an insect is, or what makes a good fly. Am I the best fly I can be? It just operates in the same way, ironically, that the computer does.
It's very selfish gene, isn't it? It's very, you know, I am a genetic transmission machine.
Yeah,
I am a thing for transmitting genes. Yeah.
I'm an engine. I don't have those problems of consciousness that human beings do.
I mean, just before we leave Stathis for a moment, one thing I will say, because I don't necessarily disagree with what either of you have said about him, but I do think it is also quite relevant that he, at the end, And he is incredibly brave, but he reasserts his power through the gun. So we get this symbol of the sort of rugged individual frontiersman. But in a sense, I mean, obviously he's a depleted man even as he does it. Like, I mean, he's been attacked and he's had that awful enzyme vomited
Bloody
over
hell.
it.
By the way, that's the bit that I find the most. I have to look away. I hate that. I hate that so much.
And it is, again, it's the power of the reaction shot. I mean, the gore is, but it is committed acting as well.
By all accounts, that was much longer, that sequence in the original cut, and they had to cut it because it was making people ill.
In the original cut, he eats the foot. The foot comes off, and Brundlefly
eats it. Yeah,
and it was too much for people. Apparently.
Understandable.
I get that. Because the sequence is harrowing.
The infamous monkey cat sequence as well.
Yes. Yes.
But of course, at the end of that film, we have to remember that Veronica takes that phallic symbol to complete the job. So it's really clear how she. And I just kept coming back to how she has to be, and this would say she's navigating not primarily between Seth and Stathis, but she has to be in this film both woman and, if you like, quote unquote, air quotes, proper man. I mean, even her name, because they interchange Veronica and Ronnie, so it becomes her name is not nailed down to it's not she has a nickname which isn't genderized and so on, or it's got an ambiguous thing. But
I'll just say this: it's the 80s. Ronnie.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Reagan.
Yeah.
So you've got all these things at play. You've got the woman entering the career place, which again we really starts to come through in a lot of like 1970s films such as Network and things like that with Faye Dunaway. And you've got the woman navigating male spaces in terms of careers. You've got Ronnie Reagan. You've got the frontiersman. You've got it's all cooking.
And the way Gina Davis plays Ronnie as well. I mean, Ronnie is very. She exhibits very stereotypically masculine traits all the way through the film. She's dominant in almost every relationship. Like when she first meets Seth. Seth is kind of he's a nerdy nerd, isn't he? He's a bit of a shut-in. He's a bit closeted and he doesn't really know how to navigate things. She does. She's the world.
She's even fundamentally in control in the Stathis relationship as well. I mean, that's
because
he tries.
She's not intimidated.
Yeah, exactly. He tries to be an abusive boyfriend or an abusive ex or a stalker, and he can't pull it off.
He can't even do that.
Yeah, exactly. He's a failure at even being a creep, and it's not just because he's sort of, as I say, it's not that he's weak, because the film goes out of its way to show you that he is actually strong when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
But it is that there's, he just fundamentally doesn't have the necessary level of toxicity in him. But it's also that Ronnie fundamentally just won't have it. She does not. She lets him get away with far too much. But she doesn't actually, and she does go to him when she needs help. I remember watching this and thinking, do you really have nobody else you can go to for help? Is it really this guy or nobody? But apparently.
But it does seem that way, doesn't it? You get the impression, and again, it's all ambient from the way Gina Davis plays Ronnie, from certain things in the script, that she is on her own in this place, in this city, and she's making her own way. And that's it, right? That's just the way she is. And I think it kind of galls her as well, the fact that she does have to go to him for help, but she doesn't have much choice.
As I say, I think she wants this story partly because she wants to get out on her own. She wants to get away from him. She wants to get away from this magazine and strike out on her own. Because she does try to hide it from him at one point, doesn't she?
Yeah, certainly does.
But you do get this situation where these two men end up both being bodily mutilated.
Yes,
and she sort of, is at the center of it.
That is interesting, isn't it? Because it is kind of it's a very base, almost like sexual competition. You can read it as, maybe one of the reasons Stathis is so brave and strong at the end is because in supporting her, he's doing away with a rival. He's removing the baby by supporting the abortion, which is the most fundamental link between Ronnie and Seth at that point. And also he's kind of, he's ready to kill Seth with not necessarily with bad reason, but even so, it's removing a rival, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a really good performance from John Getz, though, because you get the feeling that he genuinely cares about her.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and that he is destroyed for the lack of her, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Which it's just that his reaction is infantile. That's all.
Yeah.
It's just his reaction is very patriarchal. It's like,
he's
I'm
deeply
entitled
immature.
to you. Yeah, I'm entitled to you. Why are you doing this to me?
I mean,
it's
even
not about you.
Isn't it? I'm onto something big. What, his cock? It's like a teenage boy.
Yeah, absolutely. He's reduced. He's reduced to a child, right?
And then the situation with trying to get the abortion, this attempt at control.
Yeah.
Although it's quite a different stage in the narrative by then, because she's presented with obviously the realization about what could potentially be at the end of her pregnancy.
Jeez. Yeah, and of course you get the infamous dream sequence where Cronenberg is the surgeon.
Apparently Gina Davis insisted upon that.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah, you can tell I've been swatting up, can't you? Apparently she insisted on that because she felt uncomfortable doing the scene with somebody she didn't know, and I like how much the actors seem to have really liked working with Cronenberg. Jeff Goldblum has nothing but sort of effusive, glowing praise for Cronenberg. And Gina Davis obviously liked working with him as well. He's obviously a nice person to work with, at least.
Well, that struck me as well, because the only other person I could think of around that time who seemed to have such glowing respect from actors was probably Richard Donner, who seemed to be very popular with actors as well, albeit in very different genres. But David Cameron's, and considering, last week we were talking about Ridley Scott, who maybe doesn't always have
doesn't necessarily have the best relationship with them, no, or with anyone apparently.
And it upends a cliche. It's nice. You've got someone who is very driven and has got a very strong idea of what they want their film to be, but isn't an asshole.
Yeah, and I imagine. I mean, like, it must have been difficult as well, particularly for Goldblum, because of course there are the sequences of transformation where he is just buried beneath successive layers of makeup and latex, and he has to alter his physical performance as well, which is fantastic. I mean, his physical performance in this film is insanely brilliant.
Oh, you can tell there's a theatre actor underneath that before he became his body control and his awareness of how to move is like, it's
incredible. Given that he's got to change it at various sequences, so you get the initial Seth Brundle, who's a little bit recessed inside of his tweed coat, isn't he? He's a little bit hunched. He looks short, even though he isn't. That it's really quite clever. And then you get the Seth Brundle after he goes through the teleporter for the first time, who is this physical peak of athleticism and is doing cartwheels and whatnot. And then, of course, you get the real degeneration. By the way, one of the sequences I find the hardest to watch is when she first goes to him. After that, how long is it? It's like is it 4 weeks or something? And he calls her and says, "You were so right." And when she finds him, he's on crutches and his face is all boils. And the reason I find that so difficult is, again, one of the themes that's sort of like retroactively being applied to this film is, of course, the AIDS crisis. Which it reflects massively. And if you've ever seen any of the footage or photographs of AIDS victims during that period, that image ain't a million miles away, I'm telling you.
No.
It ain't a million miles away. And the way he moves as well, that feebleness, the weakness, where it looks like if he moves too far, he'll split and, like an overripe fruit and spill out. It's
the bit where she goes to embrace him, and she doesn't know how to do it, and he kind of shies away from her touch as well. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's vile. I mean, if you look at there's little details as well. If you look at his shirt at that time, you can see like where the material has like split the skin underneath, and there's like seepage and lymph, and it's
And I think.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that this film shouldn't, this reading, as you say, understandably got attached to this text. It shouldn't be a singular thing because the film is about so much else. However, it does impact on you, particularly probably people of our age and a little older, because as we had discussed not long ago, George, we're in this strange, I mean, certainly strange to people of our generation, this strange moment now where the awfulness, the sheer awfulness of what HIV/AIDS did to the first generation of young people who got it, is fast becoming a footnote in history.
Yes,
because of all the breakthroughs, because of everything we've gotten, things that, as we had said, I just find head spinning that we be here in a matter of decades. But if watched in the context, and you are looking at it through that lens, oh my god, it's just so upsetting.
It's quite hard to watch. It's that sequence in particular, for some reason, it's the combination of the imagery, it's the crutches, it's the feebleness of him, it's the gloves, it's the gloves that, like, I've seen pictures of AIDS victims from the era wearing gloves a bit like that because they're afraid of touching anyone, or people are afraid of being touched by them. You know, it's like, oh my god,
and it's difficult, of course, because
I'm sorry, I really am sorry to break in at this point, but
go ahead.
Are we recording? Because I can't see the little red button. I can't see where it says recording.
Yeah, I'm recording via OBS here. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
sorry.
Fine. It's no problem.
No, that's a good reason to interrupt.
No, I've got it. Don't worry.
Okay.
No, I've got it. We're fine.
I mean, in future, I could always do a copy as well, because now we have the various software, so then we can have it in triplicate. But yeah,
no, I thought no, it's okay. We'll wing it. But no, I thought I'd better ask.
But no, I mean, you're right. It's the AIDS thing is being retroactively applied to it because, of course, it was made at the height. It was 1986. This was released.
Well, is it so retroactive? I know David Cronenberg sort of disavowed the AIDS metaphor, and it's definitely not just an AIDS metaphor, because it's even in the theme about the body, it's about so much more than that. Even just if we narrow it down to bodily change or just physicality, it's about puberty, it's about cancer, it's about aging, it's about pregnancy, it's about it's about being embodied. It's about being
the weight of
it's the anxiety
event.
of being an embodied being.
I just
there's a wonderful
at that time means that it can't help but I think Cronenberg was probably right to, if not disavow it, then to play it down, because the danger, of course, is he takes something which is current or contemporaneous and turns it into something monstrous, and I think he's sensitive enough not to want to do that.
Well, it also turns it into a parable, doesn't it?
Yes,
it
was just such a heavy moment in our history that inevitably you couldn't really not push that out of your mind.
It's like The Thing, isn't it? That's very much an AIDS film, but it's not consciously so. You know, it's just ambient. It's in the air. You can't help, if you're making, in this era, if you're making a film which is about anxieties of the body,
it's going to be read.
It's going to be there.
But as I say, I'm not sure that I quite believe that it was as absent from the minds of the creators of this film as Cronenberg has claimed.
Agreed.
Because there's even a scene where Brundle talks about what's happened to him as if it's a sexually transmitted infection. As if it's, in fact, even more fundamentally than that, he talks about it as if it's a breeding. He talks about being bred with the fly. He says the computer mated me with the fly, and we hadn't even been properly introduced. So even the film itself frames that central moment of infection. It does act like an infection. It's altered very definitely from the original, where it's an immediate sort of body mashup thing. It's not like that at all. In fact, the film even lingers on that because it subverts your expectation. When he comes out, you get the lingering on the pod opening, and out comes a perfectly intact, normal looking Seth Brundle. The film even says to you, this isn't working the way it used to work in the old film.
In the original film,
becomes an
it's almost a joke, isn't it? It's almost like saying, you expected, just like the original, you expected him to have the head of a fly.
especially with the poster, which has the telepod and the white light and the mist and everything, and it has a human hand reaching out, but it also has a gigantic fly's legs sticking out. You go in at the cinema in 1980, whatever it was, six, expecting something that you definitely don't get. You get what is very definitely framed as an infection. He is infected at that point, and the point of infection is framed in some ways as a mating.
And also sexual, right? Because like when he emerges, when you see him in the pod, he's naked and he's really built and beautiful, you know.
And he becomes hypersexualized as well as a result of what's in the initial stages as well. Yes,
but that's also very easy to read in that context, because if you think about in terms of post sexual intercourse, as long as it's been everyone's happy with what's occurred, the elation that the human being feels, and then of course the horror of HIV/AIDS was it was 2 weeks. It's rather like the slow process of what occurs here. It's a fortnight before your person suddenly has the chills tear through them.
Symptoms.
It's like, oh my God, have I got a cold? Have I got a flu?
Right. Even then, right, people just didn't know.
And then you don't know. And then it's like, it's another stage and another stage, and it's not necessarily fast. And
I mean,
so inevitably.
It's another thing that this film is about, isn't it? It's another thing that this film touches on ambiently, which is this. And part of it was as a result of AIDS, but part of it was just as a result of media and access to media, culture.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but
just,
I was a kiddo in the 80s, double figures by the end of it, going into puberty in the 90s. But there was a real dread, there was a real fear of HIV/AIDS.
Oh yeah, and it lingered for a long time.
To the extent where there was, I always remember sort of being a teenager thinking, well, not consciously thinking necessarily, but being aware that there was a strange contradiction in being obviously excited by the idea of sex because I was a young person, and it was something that could possibly happen, but also being terrified because there was still this. There was so much warning, so much. You could still hear John Hurt in your head with those awful ads, which really were
even
not a great idea.
Right up until the late 1990s, early 2000s, when I would have been becoming sexually active. That fear that was still very much there, particularly in queer communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And and therefore, it is easy to watch this film and feel that creeping fear.
But it's not just about that, is it? I mean, it's like it's almost like a microcosm of one of the wider implications of the film, which is about this wider cultural understanding of disease. I mean, another thing that was happening at the time, do you remember the cancer scares around this era? The media got a hold of cancer, as particularly like tabloids in this country, as a seller, right? If they, if something like the Mail or the Sun, if they didn't have a minority to persecute, they'd run a cancer story, they'd run a story about, bread gives you cancer, sugar gives you cancer, everything fucking gives you cancer, breathing gives you cancer.
This actually reminds me, this hooks back to another previous episode. I think, I might be misremembering this, but I think it's in the novel Red Dragon, which of course is the basis of Manhunter, which we've talked about on this film, and is also adapted in Hannibal, where in one of the sections from Freddie Lowndes' point of view, and of course we're talking about Book Freddy, who is a skeevy guy instead of a sort of glorious red-headed magical creature. He's talking about this horrible tabloid that he works for, the Tatler, and he talks about how it's designed to be put on racks next to the till at the supermarket, and what you do is every other week you have a cancer story. 1 week it's a miracle cancer cure, the next week it's bread gives you cancer, or breathing gives you cancer, and the sales always go up 20%. I'm sure that's in that book.
Cancer sells, man.
You still have that dimension, of course, because you then have the moment where the anxiety when Seth meets the other young woman is he's going to have sex with her, and therefore he can infect her. And then, of course, running through the same thing is Veronica is infected, although it's put in the idea of procreation that oh my God, you could impregnate. It's clearly also infection.
And it's explicit at that point as well, because Seth has started to physically transform. He's got the markings on his face, and he smells bad.
the other young woman is saved by Veronica, as it turns out.
Yeah.
And there are lines of dialogue which explicitly Stathis talks about it might be infectious, and he likens Seth to Typhoid Mary.
Yes,
Yes,
Typhoid Mary. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
God, yeah. I mean, that's an anxious and horrible thought as well, isn't it? You know, you feel for Ronnie at that point. You think, oh my God, what could happen to her?
And that's why the dream is so.
Yeah.
Oh, the dream is amazing. It's so disturbing.
It's so unpleasant. It's so weird and bizarre and very Cronenbergian.
I think it really is a sort of a hinge point where you can see these themes joining up, which is, I think for me, it's like the thing that I find most sort of existentially terrifying about this film is just the idea of one minuscule mistake, and it takes a split second, and from that moment onwards, everything is different. The past is irrecoverable. Nothing will ever be the same. Doom is certain and set, and you can never get it back. You can never go back to that moment, that split second just before you made the tiny, apparently insignificant mistake that destroyed everything. And there's something about that, the way this film portrays that to you, that is so, it hurts your heart to think about.
It's doom-laden and dolorous.
And
funnily enough,
that
it's consistent.
That joins the themes up for me, because that is how, I mean, I can't speak to this from personal experience, and I wouldn't want to try to speak for people who have suffered this, but I can imagine that people who contracted AIDS in the 80s, they must have had that thought, mustn't they? They must have thought to themselves, there was a moment just before I did whatever it was, whether it was use the wrong needle or sleep with the wrong person, when I could have not done it. But I did it. And that moment, all it took was a second. And that moment is gone forever. I can never get it back. And it is my doom.
Yeah, it's the mourning of a life, isn't it? That's what you get from everyone's perspective here in various different ways and shades. I mean, what they go through in many respects is a life. It's like time contracted down. So if you look at their romance as a microcosm of that, you get that, you know, the initial very exciting sexual side, and then they very quickly start talking about, oh, let's go on a cruise. Like they've been together for a couple of years. You know, it's almost like getting married. And then you have you have the child, and then you have the affair and the abortion, and it is like a marriage, a romance and a marriage in microcosm, just contracted down.
Yeah, I think on a very deep level, this film is just about how time passes and how it just flies. Bloody hell, I'm doing puns without meaning to now. It flies past, and it's gone, and your entire life just goes by in a second.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, relationship with time it just becomes so peculiar, even as how you think about times you've had in the past. I mean, I find this particular decade has seriously fucked up my sense of time because of the era of lockdown. And admittedly, Vicky and I were in it for slightly longer than most people because we had to shield but so re-emerging, and it's like, my gosh, we're now in the latter half of the decade very suddenly. And of course, subjectively, I'm thinking, well, hang on, it felt much longer to be in the 2010s from my perspective. What's going on? Then, of course, you have to factor in the fact that, a year is only 1/46th of my life now, whereas back then it was 1/33rd or whatever, but this film does compress time in the most interesting ways, almost because it knows. I mean, it already, the audience knows going in that time will run out for these characters, and it plays with that beautifully.
It's kind of implicit in the central concept as well, isn't it? Because the teleporter is, on the surface, it's to do with space. It's to do with travel and movement and the location of the body. But of course, time and space are just intimately related. You can't separate them. They're the same thing looked at from different angles. So if you had a teleporter where you could, 1 second you're in one place and the next second you're in another, even if it's just across the room, you are altering time. You are completely altering human time.
Yeah.
Because
And
even in that little room that he lives in, he has changed time to the extent that it doesn't take him that amount of time to walk from one end of
yes,
the room to the other. If you
absolutely.
extrapolate that across the world, if you actually invented something like that, I mean, firstly, there's no fucking way you'd get me in one. I'd be like Dr.
No,
Pulaski in Star Trek. But
absolutely not.
it would completely change the world because
Yeah,
time would disappear.
yeah.
Space would disappear, obviously, but
Mhm.
time would disappear as well as we
Yeah.
know it.
You also
Well,
have that. You have
outside the
that the
fly.
reverse of the problem with the time machine as well. Of course, I mean, one of the big problems.
Well, this is
with
it.
the
It
time
is essentially
machine,
a time machine, isn't it?
Yeah.
The telepod is a time machine.
Yeah.
And yet it's a time machine that only goes forward when what he needs
Yeah.
is desperately for it to be able to go
be able to
backwards.
go
Yeah,
back. Yes,
exactly.
which is what he's trying to do at the end, isn't it? He's trying
Exactly.
to reverse the process, but
Yeah.
it's not working. I mean, there's a very interesting
Because it can't be
note.
done. Time's
It
arrow
can't be
flies in one
done,
direction
right.
only.
There is a very interesting note when he comes for Ronnie in the abortion clinic, and he says to her, "That's the last part of me. Please don't kill me." He's talking about the baby, of course, which is not even a baby. It's not. It's like it's barely an embryo. It's like nothing. It's like a zygote at this point.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting commentary. It's not only about it's not only about time and the way we look at future generations and whatnot, but it's also it's another one of those commentaries on patriarchy and the way fathers view children, which is as expressions of
Yes.
themselves, right?
Yes.
And nothing else. So something that doesn't exist outside of themselves.
Well, he even says to her at the end when he's trying to force her to go through the telepod and sort of mush them all up together, Brundlefly, Ronnie, and Baby all in one organism, presumably. He says, "We'll be the ultimate family."
Right.
So his idea of the ultimate family is where he absorbs his wife, so to speak, and his
it's
child.
almost cannibalistic, isn't it?
It is. It's ownership taken to an extreme.
But there is the nuclear family.
There is. I mean, very literally, right? Very literally.
Exactly.
Wow. I mean, just on a purely aesthetic level, guys, that fucking transformation at the end is one of the best. It's so
staggering.
good.
The way that shot of his face and his eyes sort of sliding apart, and you suddenly realize what's happening. What's happening is that Brundlefly was a lava
cocoon, right?
It's turned Seth Brundle's body, or rather its synthetic copy of Seth Brundle's body, into a larva, which is now hatching.
Yeah. I mean,
it's stunning.
What's really interesting, I mean, and again, it's an existential quandary. If it were not for the lingering remnants, the engrams of Seth Brundle wanting to be human again, what would that entity make of itself? What would that be? Because it's more whole than Brundlefly is. It's more complete. It's not rotting.
Yeah.
It's like it's a complete organism. It's a complete anatomy. So if it was given time, if it was given chance to become itself, what would that be?
But I don't know. It's sentient because of its gesture at the end.
Yes.
It's actually that creature, the creature inside Brundle that hatches. It's that throws Ronnie into the telepod. It operates the computer, and then when it comes out, of course, it tells her wordlessly, of course, but it tells her to kill it. Yeah. So it's sentient. It's alive. It thinks. It's intelligent.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. How much of that is the fly? How much of that is Seth? How much of that is
We're back at Wittgenstein. If a fly could talk, we wouldn't understand what it said.
I am an insect who dreamt he was a man and loved it, but now the dream is over and the insect is awake.
Yeah, and you can't help thinking of Gregor Samsa, can you?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yes, very, very much so, and indeed. There is something,
and also a hunger artist. Actually, this is kind of an adaptation of two Kafka stories simultaneously.
Yeah. But certainly, that can't help but come to mind.
But the for me, the absolute tour de force of horror is when it sees what's happened. It sees that Stathis has shot the cable, and it starts trying to get back out of the telepod. And it smashes the window, so it's halfway out of the door when the teleport program is activated, and the teleport program sort of takes it and half the outer shell of the telepod with it. And you get that I remember being so affected by this, watching it as a kid. You get the thing come up on the computer, the idiot moron computer trying to do it. Says fusion of Brundlefly and telepod successful. And when it comes out, it's just this, it hasn't, what I love about it is that it hasn't actually it hasn't been able to meld the two things. It's not a biomechanoid like if we must call it this, the xenomorph. It's just the organism, but with bits of machines stuck in it. And the horror of that, just the sheer bloody pitiful mess of it. It's so affecting.
Because by that point, that's it, isn't it? I mean,
you could argue that it's not. There's not any remote trace of Seth Brundle at that point. That is something that the fly realizes that its flyness has been compromised, and that's why it wants its own death.
I mean, I mean, my God, that's
not Seth at all.
Is insect politics, isn't it? I'm not a good fly anymore.
I'm not a good fly anymore. Yeah, I think that it can be easily read as that there's no Seth by that, or even facsimile Seth or reduced down idiot copy of Seth. Once the larva has hatched, and
I think that's it for Seth.
When it puts the gun to its head, that's not the last trace of Seth Brundle's humanity asserting itself. That's a creature that realizes it's no longer the creature it was,
or anything,
and it cannot function. And therefore, it needs to be swatted.
It must self-destruct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, wow! It's amazing, isn't it?
Because I think it can and probably. I mean, that's when ambiguity really works so well, because I think that you want it on some level as a viewer to be that last trace of Seth Brundle, but I don't think it is.
I don't think it is.
Ronnie definitely interprets it that way, because the way Gina Davis plays it, she plays it as, but
you can't blame her. I mean, my God, no, you can't blame her.
And yet the interesting thing is we've had a summary of insect politics earlier in the film. Seth has the line about insect politics and how it's brutal and there's no compassion.
Insect politician.
What a line! That's Cronenberg. That's pure Cronenberg. That is.
And it's very thematically fertile. Again, it's the 80s. We have the encoded reference to Ronald Reagan.
Yes,
we have
and to neoliberalism, right? Which is kind of insect politics, right? It is brutal, and it is Darwinian, and it is about consumption. Yeah.
Exactly, and Seth explicitly works for a corporation that owns everything he does, and so on and so on. But
corporation no more sees the poetry of what Seth is trying to do than the computer does. That
no.
I think if I remember rightly, correct me if I'm wrong, in the very much inferior sequel, aren't the telepods isn't that a military research?
I think it is. Yes,
it's the Bartok Corporation. The second film is set mainly inside the corporation.
Which is one of its better elements, actually.
Although the second film is sorry.
I was just saying, you got to hand it. You were saying earlier about puns. You've got to hand it to Stathis in that second film where he says when he meets Eric Stoltz, so he says, "The problem is with your dad. He bugged me."
The second film is not as bad as its reputation, but it's not particularly good.
No, it's schlocky, isn't it? It's fun.
Yeah,
it's fun.
It's quite fun
as far as it goes. That's about as far as it goes, though, I'm afraid. And it's a shame.
It's very interesting that you have in terms of its stars, you have an actor who is extremely good at taking very, very serious material and bringing in a kind of surreal sense of humor. I think that's Jeff Goldblum's great gift as an actor. He does it in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, he does it in this, he does it in other things. There's a certain, rather like Cronenberg, a certain wryness to him. And then in the second film, you've got an actor who brings such intense seriousness and earnestness to things, Eric Stoltz, and they're like misapportioned in the respective film. Not in Jeff Goldblum's case, but in Eric Stoltz's case, it's like you're giving a valiant performance, Eric, but
Yes.
it might be somewhat misplaced.
It may be. The material doesn't really warrant it, does it?
Whereas actually, because I think it's part of Goldblum's intelligence as an actor, because the film is so grueling and because it is so sad, he all the way through, even when he's going through these awful stages, he's finding moments that feel positive and lyrical.
It's part of why there's a wonderful moment. I was going to mention it before, but we sort of moved on from it, where this is a bit of the film that I love this film. I think it's a masterpiece, but there is one element of it that I think is just silly. It doesn't work, which is the walking around on the ceiling stuff. There's no logical reason why he would be able to climb walls, and I mean, this is a failed superhero origin story, and you see that more clearly than in those scenes where he's climbing around. They're very well done.
It's Spider-Man, isn't it? Yeah.
It makes exactly, and it makes aesthetic sense because it's a fly, and flies walk on the ceiling. Yes. But in a film that is in other ways so grounded, it's a bit odd because he just wouldn't be able to do that.
Yes,
but it does. There is a great bit in one of those scenes where he sort of lifts up his shirt and there's this lump growing out of his abdomen, and Jeff Goldblum says, "Look at this. What's this?" I don't know. And the other scene I love is the bit where he's looking in his cabinet of relics.
Yes.
And it's the way he plays it, and ironically, it makes it all the more grueling and sad, because if Seth was just sort of if he played him as unrelievedly sad and miserable, you as the audience would have some kind of outlet for your feeling for him through his own unhappiness. But the fact that Seth kind of rallies and starts almost enjoying or watching what's happening to him out of sort of scientific curiosity and making little jokes about it, it's like a twist of the knife in the guts. Because you can see somebody trying to live when they're very clearly dying,
and it's manifested through Gina's performance when she's watching it. The way she plays it is amazing,
because she's horrified by his every joke, and she can't handle it.
In fact, she plays it. She's exhausted. She does this thing with her head where she sort of like tilts her head back and she sighs and she goes, "Hi," and she can't answer him. It's brilliant.
I think. The acting is it's uniformly great, but I think the trophy has to go to Gina, because if she doesn't sell her reactions to any of this, the whole thing falls to pieces. And she sells it all right the way through, right? And there's the wonderful bit of the performance is when he's doing the insect politics speech. He says to her, "Have you ever heard of insect politics?" And she reacts to it like, "This is what is this? What am I hearing? This is insanity. This is crazy." And it's so human. It's so great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Like the interactions, the dialogue, it's just fucking fantastic.
I mean, that screenplay things, it really does. And as I said earlier, it could have been so close to falling down because of what he's trying to do with those lines. But he holds it, and as we said, he's got a uniformly great cast. So they know how to do it. They know how to find the color and the texture in those lines, and they know which ones to throw away so it doesn't feel too heavy-handed. It's really special.
It's honestly beautiful. I mean, I was enraptured by it, by the dialogue.
And I think also the fact that I admire Cronenberg as a sculptor as well, because I mean, he in the editing of his films, I mean, an awful lot got taken out of this because he was trying to tell a particular story, and he had a particular idea about how we should respond to Seth Brundle. Because I know, for example, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, he takes out the hybrid baboon cat scene. He takes out another scene. Well, he takes out the foot scene. He takes out a scene which was, he said, was going for a bit of a political thing, bit heavy-handed perhaps, where Seth basically experiments with the enzyme on a homeless person, and they said, "No, that's got to go. It's too much, and we're just going to hate him from too early in the film." So I think he's also very select, because I think a lesser director would have had all these wonderfully sensationalist moments and thought, well, let's keep more because it's going to titillate the audience, or it's got to be talked about for for months, whereas actually by taking them out, he got a film that's been talked about for years instead.
Years, yeah, absolutely. You kill sympathy for Seth, and you kill the film.
Yeah, but he's also, I think, very good at, because obviously he has this reputation because of this and Videodrome and his other movies, and yet he's actually very good at throwing away good sequences in terms of technically good sequences, because that's he puts character and story first, which is as it should be, but it's still sometimes quite surprising when people do.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, it's one of those odd films. I mean, Cronenberg has this reputation as being this cold intellectual, doesn't he? Being very clinical in what he does, and I don't find that in most of his films, but I certainly don't find it in this one.
The Dead Zone either. I mean,
No,
I think
of
the Dead Zone is an incredibly human film.
Yeah,
incredibly human film.
I mean, this is what is it at base? This is a romance, right? This is a romantic film in a very sincere and real way. And without that element, it falls flat. It dies.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I mean, absolutely stunning. Of all, I mean, it's just maybe a strange film to describe as beautiful given its aesthetics, but it is. It's a stunningly beautiful film on so many levels, and I think one of the most various in terms of its ideas that we've discussed. It's a bit like Alien in that regard.
Yeah, and it's prophetic. I think the subplot about the computer is actually prophetic.
Yeah, totally prescient.
Because
totally prescient.
It's an interesting thing about computers. Computers in old movies, they do things that computers didn't used to be able to do. In old movies, you just type in. It happens in Alien. Ripley types in questions. She says, what's happening with the alien, etc. It happens in this one as well. He types in what happened with that telepod. I'm letting my Star Trek show, the telepod accident, and the computer answers him. Now, until very recently, computers didn't do that. They didn't work like that. You couldn't do that with a computer.
Nope, true.
You can now. You can actually do that with computers. You can go and, if you want to, and I don't recommend you do, you can fire up ChatGPT and you can type in a question like, what's going on with this Iran thing? And it'll answer you with, well, Jack, what's happening? That's new. But it's the chicken and the egg, isn't it? Did we make computers that can do that because we saw films like this or whatever? Right. But the thing is, the computer in this film, it even comes up with little pictures for him.
Yes.
He says, analyze this DNA that I've found in the sample. And it's a great scene, actually, that where you get this picture of a spike or a spine or something, and it zooms out into the really genuinely horrifying alien anatomy of a fly when you look at it close up. It's fantastic. But again, back in the 80s, computers didn't do things like that. They do now. You can fire up your phone and say, show me a close-up picture of a fly, and it will generate an AI image for you.
Yeah, you could get like a 3D image that you could turn around now, that you could zoom in and analyze the anatomy and whatnot. But it also predicts how idiotic that system is.
Exactly. That's because, as we've been saying, it's central to the film. Once you dig a little bit below the surface, this is not a telepod accident or even a human accident. This is a case of shitty programming. The computer is just badly programmed, or rather it's being given things to do that computers aren't actually capable of doing. It's being asked to think. It's doing exactly what we're doing now with computers. We're pretending they're alive and we're asking them to do our thinking for us. And they're getting it all wrong, to the point even, actually, of producing images of human beings that are grotesquely, weirdly deformed and distorted. It's like this film saw the future.
It's so prescient.
6 fingers and so on.
Absolutely.
And the terrifying thing is how AI will eat itself, because currently it's been programmed in a rather dunderheaded fashion. Well, the next stage is it just follows the previous program, and the next stage after that is it follows its previous program of its previous program, or Seth Brundling again. So it can only deteriorate. It can the information can only get less valid, less reliable, less coherent.
The foundation,
which is precisely what happens in this film. Precisely what in this film with Seth Brundle. If if we treat human beings as, or animals actually, as information, which is the fundamental problem, the fundamental mistake, is that he's trying to treat flesh as just information. That's why when he hasn't done the mock-up sufficiently well, the steak tastes synthetic. So he thinks, well, I just need to program it better. No, you can't get it to do what you're asking it to do. You just get a better and better and better copy. And what you're doing with that is by turning it into information, you're making it into just information and nothing more. And the more you copy it and reproduce the information, and he goes through the telepod repeatedly, that's a plot point, he gets less himself. So it's like photocopying something over and over and over and over again. Eventually it's just a black sheet. Well, that's what's going to happen with AI. Like you said, it's going to auto cannibalize, and it's going to copy its information round and round and round in this gigantic Ouroboros disappearing up its own arse until it becomes just it's the information grey goo scenario. That's where LLMs are leading us, to the information grey goo scenario. And that is almost exactly what you see metaphorically represented in this film as the copy gets less and less sensical. It gets, in the end, as I say, it just becomes this kind of meaningless, god-awful, pitiful mess of machine and fly and human all smudged up together. This film is incredibly prophetic of our current moment.
Yeah.
By
accident, apparently. Except that it's not really an accident because it's happening because it's thinking really deeply about the schlocky ideas that it's treating.
Yes.
Honestly, it's amazing. It's an amazingly intelligent film. This time round, in particular, watching it, my breath was taken away. Given the context we're operating under now, I just couldn't.
I did not. When I stuck this on a week ago to rewatch it for this, I did not expect to find out that it was an accidental, radical metaphor about the dangers of LLMs.
No, not at all.
I think that's what it is.
I'd forgotten that element. I'd actually more or less sidelined that element in favor of the body horror stuff. But yeah,
and I suppose that, there's a lot in 80s movies about computers. Because it was the dawn. It was the dawn of the computer era.
It's a new anxiety, right? So
a new insecurity.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to keep doing this until you put an end to it.
Until we stop.
Yeah.
You mentioned Trek earlier, Jack, saying, "Oh God, I'm using Trek metaphors or Trek vocabulary." But,
I nearly said transporter accident.
Yeah, because this basically makes it explicit. I mean, just wandering off track for a second. One of the things I found so terrifying as a child, which is that one scene from the very first Star Trek movie where they have the transporter accident, because it's all done by implication, because obviously whatever's beamed back, we hear it over the tannoy or the communicator. Well, what came back didn't live very long, and that although it's more about implication, a terrifying scene. I think it's one of Star Trek's best moments, actually, best moments of horror and everything, because it takes this thing that's been considered to be a wonderful, fantastical advancement, something so reliable, just shooting people from here over to there and over to there to there. And in this film, this first big screen adaptation goes, do you know what? We're going to make that thing nightmarish. We're going to make it horrifying. And then the fly comes along.
There's no plot reason for it either.
No, it's just dumped in.
They just do it.
They just do it, and it's almost like you've got an entire film in embryo there, and along comes Cronenberg and says, "Oh, my pint." Because I remember that first view, that first viewing, and some of the because I guess obviously the scene that you obviously link between the transporter accident in Star Trek and the and what happens here is obviously is the first test with a living animal, the baboon, and it's just such a shock. It's such a shock when it opens.
It's gross. Honestly, it's so foul.
Oh, crumbs. And again, this dunderheaded computer program, which is like, it's doing the right thing. It's put it back together. It's just put it back together the wrong way around.
All the elements are there. All the elements are there. It's just wrong.
And you're back to your steak then, aren't you? It's like,
Wow. what.
That's when you realise that there are there are certain definite horizons on certain scientific possibilities, and this is one of them.
Well,
this
it's
yeah.
basically Lovecraftian, isn't it? In that regard, it is the stuff that man is not meant to wot of, right?
Yeah.
Transmitting matter is not possible, but if it were, it would be destructive of matter. You would in every single episode of Star Trek, Jean-Luc Picard dies, and then a new one is created. I'm sorry,
the one
but
that's created is created from pure information made flesh. So
that's what happens.
Again,
right?
then you're back into your philosophical argument about
and again,
what makes us human.
It's innate to that. I mean, Cronenberg is so careful with the language that he puts in his characters' mouths. When Seth is describing to Ronnie what's happening, he's saying the item is disintegrated over there and reintegrated over there. It's disintegrated.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Destroyed.
Disintegrated. Now, how can that mean anything other than destroyed?
Destroyed. Right.
Yeah. In what sense is the matter that is assembled a few meters away the same matter? I mean, matter is only energy in a particular form.
Yeah.
So it can't be, can it?
There's
But the thing about Star Trek actually kind of has this vast echoing nihilism at its core, because it does kind of just take it for granted that a computer assembled copy of you is just the same as you. It's as good as. There's no fundamental difference.
It's fine, right? But
this film doesn't believe that. This film does think there is a fundamental difference, doesn't it?
It brings it, it raises that whole existential question about consciousness, doesn't it? And how consciousness is linked to our material reality, to our bodies. So what?
And it's so interesting how.
Where does consciousness sit? Sorry. Where does consciousness sit?
Where is it?
If you can measure it, if the computer can break it down into elements and anatomy, then where is it? What parts of it are transmitted over?
But it's the Cartesian assumptions that are the flaw in the system, isn't it? Because the whole idea, the whole process is based upon the ghost in the machine, the Cartesian idea that there's the body and then there's the soul, and the soul the soul is hovering around somewhere, and the only question is, where is it? Well, no, that's not how it works. That just isn't how it works. But that's Seth's operating assumption, which he tries to get the computer to replicate.
Yeah,
that's why it goes wrong.
And it's quite interesting how that sort of matter transmission, matter and energy horror has progressed even in something like Star Trek. One of the more recent iterations of Star Trek did this storyline where the ship's doctor has a very young daughter who has a terminal disease that even he can't cure, and he puts her in the buffer, and every 6 months to a year he activates the beam so she can exist for maybe about an hour. Of course, every time she sees him, she's like, oh my god, you're much older. And of course, she's still a child. And he's been doing this in secret for about 10 years, unbeknownst to Starfleet, because it's there's regulations about this. It's against the law and so on. But again, that tapping into that matter transmission horror, that teleport horror, it's a very rich vein. But of course, because Star Trek has stamped on the idea of transporter technology so strongly, I mean, inevitably, someone says matter transmission, you think Star Trek. I think The Fly gets away with it because, of course, its antecedent existed before Star Trek. Or else I think it would probably be had a rougher time trying to get out from no, we're not doing a Trek thing here, guys. But actually, that schlocky B movie does contain one of the an upsetting piece of horror of its own for me, just personally. I absolutely hate the sequence in the 1950s version. It's very effective. Instead of the baboon, he sends a cat through his. The cat doesn't reintegrate. It just gets lost between the two pods, and you can just, it's very schlocky, but it's very effective, particularly if you're a child watching this. I remember the echoing sound of the cat lost between. It really upset me as a child.
I like that.
Really upset me.
It's
a very good
it raises so many questions, doesn't it?
It raises huge amounts of questions.
Where is
How
the
does
cat?
that work? Yeah, where's the cat? And does that mean the cat is constantly in that state?
Is
of
it
torture,
is
forever?
Is it in a liminal space now?
Yeah.
Or is seconds between?
Yeah.
Could that possibly be a deliberate reference to Schrodinger's cat?
Well, I do.
Almost
Yes,
certainly.
I think
I'm
you're
sure
right.
it must be. It must be.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely so.
Yeah.
But I just remember as a child finding that in some ways, that scene is more frightening than some of the stuff in the.
Oh, absolutely.
Just on a personal level, because it's that. Oh God, no.
When he's the idea is very.
At least the baboon's out of its misery pretty quickly,
Yes.
Yeah.
It's much more unsettling than Vincent Price running around with a fiberglass fly head.
Mind you, I will say that last sequence in the original with the fly with the human head and face the spider web, and the spiders coming and the little. And can you back me up on this? That's the fly saying "help me," right? Because the scientist has physically the fly's head, but he still has his own mind, doesn't he?
Yes, that's right.
So the fly in the web must have the human's head, but he must still have the fly's mind.
Yeah, he just has access to vocal cords now. And
exactly, the fly can now speak. That's the thing going, help me! That's the fly saying that. The fly has been given a brain and language.
Yeah. Which raises all sorts of horrible questions.
It has been cursed with consciousness of its situation, hasn't it?
Oh.
It has the ability to put into words what is happening to it, and ergo it can think and understand what is happening to it. And so it's the first fly in a spider's web watching a spider approach that has enough subjectivity to think, somebody help me. That's fucking Wittgenstein again.
Yeah, it is. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And again, awful by implication.
It is horrifying. It's haunted me as
horrible thought.
I have to say, I went back and looked at the old 50s one, and it is astonishing. I never noticed this, never thought about this at all when I saw it ages ago as a kid. It's astonishing to me how clearly that is a racial panic film. Because, it's about a white suburban woman whose perfectly nice white husband suddenly, pardon me, everybody, I'm going to say some things, I'm trying to talk about racism, who suddenly develops a terrifying, huge, black, furry head.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's the white man is reduced to this tiny, helpless little creature in a web.
Crumbs.
It's a race panic film. It's a 50s race panic movie.
Wow.
That's what's going on in that film. It's horrible.
And of course, it's one of those things, because it isn't Price, is it? It's David. Price is the brother, isn't he? He's the brother.
Yeah, it's I can never remember the actor's name, but he's the guy that played Felix Leiter in the Bond films. Yeah.
David Henderson, maybe
something like that. Yeah.
But I remember thinking, again, it's years and years since I've watched it. Rather appreciating the structure of the film, where they do it as a kind of a piece of crime fiction, where they find this body without a head or a hand that's crushed under a press, an industrial press, and they sort of work backwards. It's a whodunit, and I remember thinking that was quite effective. But I haven't seen it in years and years and years. But
it's a very fun film. It's a very fun film. It's entertaining, but it's its implications are a little.
Yeah, but I think
that's how I read it anyway.
It is quite conservative on almost every level. The 1950s,
but it leads us full circle. The implication, not the implication, the assertion in some quarters that the original of something is de facto always the best. It's rather, I'm always slightly, although it's beautifully photographed and there's some lovely, because it's Howard Hawks, there's some lovely stuff about like overlapping dialogue and stuff to try and make it more spontaneous. The Thing from Another World is not actually a very good film.
Shit.
It's just beautifully
horrible.
shot.
Yeah,
it's rubbish.
It is pretty rubbish. The only really impressive thing in that film is the full body burn stunt, which is pretty impressive for the era.
Whereas I think you can make a case for the 50s invasion of the Body Snatchers, though the 78 one is far richer,
vastly superior,
far more implications in that, and the same with the Fly. The Fly at best is a fun little schlocky, and then becomes this. But I think of many of those remakes, the thing from Another World is the one, ironically, which still has the accolades.
Yeah,
and yet I think it's the worst of the.
I agree. Yeah. I can't stand that movie. I hate the sort of the anti-intellectualism, the whole thing about the professor being this clueless, purblind, bleeding heart, and the proper way to be is one of the manly soldiers who they understand the proper thing to do is to just kill the alien, whereas this fucking egghead doctor wants to understand it and psychoanalyze it, and it's horrible. I hate it.
And of course they have to put him in situations where he then has to sort of sabotage things and put people's lives in danger because he's so keen to analyze the thing and all that. It's
ironically antithetical to the original short story as well, Who Goes There, which is all about the intellectualism. I mean, in fact, the short story is not great, I will say. There are reams of it, which is characters talking like textbooks, talking about minerals and geology and whatnot. But it is
that's familiar.
Isn't it just?
Currently trying to reread Mountains of Madness.
Yes, bloody hell. We'll get to that tomorrow, Jack. Or on Friday, we'll get to that.
Have you read the original short story The Fly, by the way?
No. I didn't know it was a short story.
Yeah, it's a short story by this very interesting guy called Georges Langelan, I believe his name was, who is hell of a life. He was kind of a French resistance spy and stuff like this, and it's basically the only thing he ever wrote, or the only good thing he wrote that anybody remembers. It's really quite close to the film, the original film, actually. Although they changed the ending a bit, but it's
which makes sense because I think that original film, if I recall correctly, even though everyone's speaking, with American accents and so on, and it looks like white picket fence America, it is meant to be set in France, isn't it? I think
everybody's got French names, haven't they?
That did stick.
But it's what's interesting is that this guy Georges Langelan, he kind of lived in Nazi occupied Europe for ages, undercover, with various different identities. He went undercover as if I remember rightly, which I'm probably not doing, but he went undercover as a priest at one point. And so you have this story that's all about instability of identity and your face changing.
Wow.
Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that is something that does carry over to the 1980s one, of course, the existential crisis. Yeah, very interesting. I would like to read it.
There's quite a nice audiobook version on YouTube, actually, read by Edward French, who's quite a good audio. He's a bit arch and plummy. He kind of does a Vincent Price impression thing, but he's quite fun to listen to, and he's got it on YouTube in several parts.
I'm actually quite surprised that The Fly hasn't been rebooted or remade or whatever. I mean, there is potential in this material.
Because I know that goes against what I said earlier, but it doesn't actually, because as I said, there was a coming of age in that period for this. It's not now. It would just there's I mean, I don't know. You could get someone behind it, but also I think just on a technical level, our approach to practical effects has gone, and a lot of its power in its reality. Hence the later version of The Thing, the prequel.
Yes.
Again, and of course, the Alien films, of course, have become increasingly CG laden as well.
It's really that remake stroke a prequel to the thing that they made. It's about I was going to say recently. It's about 15 years old now.
It feels recent because we're getting old.
It's in its structure and the way it's done, it's not actually a bad film. The tragedy of it is that the whole point of the exercise for the guys that made it was that they wanted to make a practical effects horror movie.
Yes.
And they did.
Yeah.
And the studio looked at it and said, nope, we're not releasing that. And they had to get rid of all the practical effects that they'd made and put in the film and replace it all with CGI.
Yeah. I mean, just the fundamental misunderstanding, right, of what makes the thing, and what makes that film sing and what makes it work. It sounds like the creators understood, at least on some level, at least on an aesthetic level.
From what I can gather, doing an old-fashioned practical effects makeup and, as Thoughtslime would put it, wet puppets monster, wet puppets monster film, that was the whole point of the exercise for them. And they did it, or at least partially did it, if I remember rightly. And the studio just said, no. Everything is CGI. This has got to be CGI or we're not releasing it. So what we got was...
that said, I do question the film conceptually as well.
The
whole notion of trying to extrapolate on what happens at the other base. It's the Nordic base, isn't it? When you already know. You already know. You don't need it. You don't need it extrapolated. It's very clear from implication, and it's just not necessary.
No, and there's indeed. A little bit of footage that I found on YouTube on the set of The Fly, where they're working with the final manifestation of The Fly, which is a glorified puppet with hydraulics and a wet puppet. And there's this wonderful moment with the crew, their sheer glee when they wanted to pull off something and they managed to do it because it's a practical effect and it's in camera and they're manipulating it in real time and they know they can't sort of tidy it up later. And there's this just it does a particular move that they've been sort of anxious about, and it works, and this eruption of cheering. It's such a wonderful moment where you just see all these people, even though there are various departments as well. It's actors, it's designers, it's the designer of the creature, it's like electrician guys, everything. They just all erupt into like cheers and everything.
Well, it is so beautiful. I mean, like,
it's a fantastic moment,
that face that emerges, the fly face that emerges from beneath the Brundlefly face. There are so many moving parts there. So many moving parts that are all doing different things. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. It reminds me a little bit of some of the best work that you get from Henson Studios. The Skeksis and that kind of thing that emote so beautifully. They feel like living things.
The way it walks as well, the feet and legs are incredible.
It's a stunning creature. It's a stunning creature.
There is such a thing as optimal technology. I mean, certainly in things in like film, you can't, you can improve on those kinds of mechanics of the hydraulics. You could probably, but you can't improve on it through a shift in the technology, not towards something. Generated imagery.
I always look at monsters in cinema, and I always go back to Harryhausen. Harryhausen had this thing about them being characters first and monsters later, effects after that, So they have to have personality. You look at things like Talos in Jason and the Argonauts, and those entities, they have such an ethos about them, such a profound sense of character. And this has something very similar, going on. It's a character before it's an effect, before it's a monster.
Even when it's the man in the rubber suit, there is something so singular and so much pushes through in the performance of that young man in Alien. That young man who was found randomly in the cafe.
Jeez.
It pushes through because you don't see it in later. Because you get stunt guys basically playing the later Alien and in that first film, there is something about his movement. He manages to push so much through through foam, rubber, and latex in terms of a sense of something in that movie.
Some actors are very good at that as well, because it's what they specialize in. I always think of Doug Jones. Usually, if you shove Doug Jones into some latex, you're going to get a really cool monster.
Yeah, although it's interesting what you said earlier, Jack, because Malkovich would have been interesting. I mean, I'm glad we got Jeff Goldblum.
I'm very glad we got Goldblum.
But there's just enough of me that wonders what Malkovich would have done.
I think Malkovich has the right quality for a version of Seth, without a shadow of a doubt. He has the right quality. I
just wonder if he might have lacked some of the lightness. That's all. The humor. I don't know.
You have to remember that
he has
Malkovich in sort
edge,
of Dangerous Liaisons era. You know, it's It would have been interesting to see.
It's just left enough tantalizing there that in an alternative dimension that would have been interesting to have that version, but I wouldn't want to lose Goldblum. But I always remember my mum, my mother, when I was watching this film at an inappropriate age, and she was like, her theory was, she said, he's odd looking. She said he's not unattractive.
No,
I remember this down the decades. Weirdly,
I think that's true. Yeah,
but she said he's also, yes, he is someone you can imagine becoming a fly, and I always remember her saying that. She said, I completely can understand why that there's something about his eyes and his bone structure which is almost going there, and it's like, okay, mum, but I sort of see what she means. Actually,
get it? Yeah, I kind of understand what she means.
Yeah, there's a kind of nervous, twitchy energy, isn't there?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
but I think she isn't unattractive, even in his very physiognomy. So there's something about the way the bone, this skin on bone, and his rather large eyes, and they're very dark, and the way his hair's been done, and everything. Yeah. I always remember her saying, I mean, of course, he wasn't the original casting choice, but that was just obviously something that occurred to her. It's like, well, he's almost sort of like 25% of the way there before it even happens. They say how people have a different kind of attractiveness, don't they? There's this thing that people do, which is there's a kind of animal like attractiveness. So, for example, I know Mads Mikkelsen has been referred to as fish attractive.
Oh,
and some people are referred to as like bird attractive, or blah, blah, blah. And clearly Jeff Goldblum must be insect attractive.
Now that's interesting. Yeah,
but I kind of see what they mean with Mads. There's something about the shape of his mouth and the way he's, I can't remember, I read this once, but it was probably at a checkout in a magazine which was telling me that cancer was in tomatoes or something.
Yeah, almost certainly.
I was casually reading while waiting for my shopping to go down the conveyor belt. Do you know your favorite actor and what animal they are related to in terms of attraction?
I suppose on a puerile level, if you want to make like sequels to this film, then you just put different creatures in pod with people, right? So what's next?
Yeah.
Spider is next, right? Surely.
Oh no, I couldn't deal with that.
The spider is next.
The vole. David Cronenberg's The Shrew.
The Shrew. The Squid. Etc.
David Cronenberg's The Goldfish.
That would be a short one, wouldn't it? That wouldn't last very long, presumably.
Yeah. He wouldn't be able to remember what just happened. Yeah. Ronnie had turned up and said, Seth, how are you? Who are you?
Who are you? Yeah.
Oh, crap.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I mean, this film, I think, of all the films we've rewatched for this series, this one has really had an effect on me. I found it amazing. I found it absolutely incredible.
Even
to watch.
from watching the edited highlights, as I said, I sort of watched quite a lot of chunks of it while avoiding certain things I knew I didn't really want to watch again. And and oddly, even though, as we said, it's the intense sadness that stays with you, there are just a couple of. I mean, I can't stand anything to do with people and their fingernails, so that had to go.
Well, so
I mean, to this day, I still can't watch. In various episodes of Twin Peaks, Cooper trying to find things under people's fingernails. I can't deal with that. And then there's the arm wrestling scene, and it's like, I'll skillfully avoid all these things.
I confess, when you get to that bit where he breaks the guy's arm, I do look away from the screen. I I don't willingly subject myself to that.
No,
And the other bit for me is the teeth falling out, because I have a real horror of the idea of teeth falling out. I've had. I mean, I know people. It's a common nightmare, but I've always had this nightmare.
Crumbling
Very
teeth
common
dream.
nightmare.
Yeah. And the bit where he's at the computer and suddenly his teeth start falling onto the
He's
keyboard.
tapping with a pen, isn't he?
No.
He's got a pencil or a pen and he's tapping, and then he chews on it, and suddenly the teeth are falling out.
Yeah, and it's the noise, isn't it? It's the
it's noise. It's the soundscape.
Yeah.
But I know Cronenberg's one naughty moment with Gina Davis was he did conspire with Jeff Goldblum that when I don't know if it's the mouth or the ear I think it's the ear falling off.
Oh, that bit.
She didn't tell her that was going to happen, and that reaction is utterly genuine.
I was praising Gina's performance earlier. I mean, we've already praised Jeff, but delivering the line "my ear" after your ear has just fallen off and making it work. I mean,
it's difficult. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Don't let anybody tell you that there isn't craft to acting, because I couldn't do that.
It's brilliant. Trying not to make parts of this risible. I mean, it's a feat. It's very clever.
Yeah,
and that is absolutely true as well. There are certain things that you think. I mean, I remember back to my training as an actor and so on, and you just think erroneously, as long as I feel as much as humanly possible that I'm in that moment and I can replicate, it'll work. And then you realize that how much doesn't translate.
Yeah.
And I certainly remember once doing my radio training, doing Carlton Hobbs, and we were sort of all led up the garden path a bit, because we were given these very, very emotional scenes of like grief or something, and we all did our very emotional grief scenes, and we heard the playbacks, and literally no one sounded convincingly upset. Even young actors were very good at getting that emotion and turning on the waterworks, and it all sounded pony, every single one of us. And the teacher said, it's one of those things that you can't go for verisimilitude. She said it's purely a technique on radio, because it's something to do with the medium. And she said the only thing that carries, and you can feel nothing. You can feel perfectly happy. It's a purely technical exercise. The only thing that carries on radio is if your voice goes up when you're trying to get through a sentence. She said you literally just have to go pitch up and slightly break the pitch, and then the person on the other end of the radio will think, "Oh my God, that character's really, really devastating." But if you try and do it, quote unquote, for real, it completely fails. And there's so many things in acting that's true for. You think you're doing the right thing, you're being as method as you can be, and it's rubbish. And it's something technical that actually carries and convinces an audience far more.
There's this thing, it's a bugbear of mine with audio acting. No specific companies shall be named, but there are people that produce audio plays to a great level of prolificness. I think one of us might even have worked for them at one point.
I think I know the one you're talking about now.
And when I used to listen to those, there was this thing that would happen a lot with some of the actors that work for this company, where in order to do emotional scenes, and I understand the impulse of the actor, because you've only got your voice to work with, you've only got sound, so you want to try to express the fact that you're going through very intense emotions. So they do this thing where they start acting with their breath, and they start going and they some actors do this, some actors do it and make it work, and there are an awful lot of actors doing audio drama who do this, and it's it's painful to listen to, particularly when they're doing it while other actors are delivering their lines. Another actor will be delivering the big important line, and the other actor will be going, "Oh," it's like, "Oh my God, stop it! Please stop!"
Don't ever listen to or watch bad dubbed anime or anything like that from the 1980s. You would fucking hate it, Jack.
There's a couple of things like that in again, it's so, it seems counterintuitive. For example, if you're in a situation where you are, and of course horror movies are full of this, where you are panicking because you're scared.
Yeah.
And again, you'd think, well, my breath, my adrenaline is up, my breath is going to be short, it's going to be at the top, it's in the throat, and it just looks busy, and it's distracting, and it's not convincing. And yet the power can come from being anxious to the point of rigid. And of course, very, very technically good actors, they just, all they really do is widen their eyes and go very, very still. And an audience will respond much more to that. But I always remember a very old trick that I was always taught. I was once taught, and I thought, God, that's brilliant. And I did actually stick with it as well in the few occasions where it did happen, where you do a play and you go into a room, and the direction was, you're surprised to see this person. You haven't seen this person for years. And one of the hardest things to play convincingly is surprise. No one buys it, because even if you're in an auditorium, of course, on some level, the audience knows, well, they've rehearsed together for weeks, so how can they be surprised? So it was like, always play against that line. And I always remember getting that line in a play once and thinking, well, the only way I'm going to be able to play it is maybe sarcastically, I don't expect to see you again. Because at least it bypasses, at least it sidesteps what is actually a very, very difficult emotion to play, which is trying to act genuinely surprised is really, really difficult. But then that's why directors, particularly in film, sometimes do what seem like arsehole moves, like, oh, the ear falls off and he hasn't told the leading actress, or what Friedkin used to do, like shooting off revolvers and things. I mean, he's an extreme, obviously, but there is a sound reason, not to that extreme, but there's a sound reason why some directors don't let their actors in on everything, because some reactions are almost impossible. It doesn't matter if you're Day-Lewis, they're impossible to pull off convincingly. And walking into a room and being surprised to see someone, it seems like the smallest thing in the world, and yet it's very hard to pull off convincingly. So the best thing is just to play against it.
I have to say, if I were Veronica Cartwright, for instance, I would be a bit pissed off at the director for thinking that he had to literally spray me with offal without telling me it was going to happen in order to get a good performance out of me. I'd be like, Ridley, do you not trust me?
Yes, there's definitely a line that it has to fall somewhere. And I've certainly been, if not me directly, but certainly been around actors whose director has done something like that, and they're like, ooh, particularly if they are of a higher status, which, let's face it, most actors were compared to me. That you're like, oh, it's about to kick off. Like, we're all going back to our trailers for an hour.
Oh man.
Yeah, no, as I say, I watched this a week ago, and it's haunting.
Me
it
too.
Genuinely is.
It stayed. It's definitely stayed, and I don't know how long it'll be before I watch it again. It might be never. It might be never, but it's.
I think that's something I recall from my viewing in my 20s. I remember the trace felt like ages. Like I couldn't stop. I couldn't get it out of my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are a few things like that, which, the one you mentioned last week, I think, George, which was Threads. Again, not something I necessarily go back and rewatch. There's just certain things. It's like
when the wind blows, it's like, no, thank you. No, thank you.
And the Fly, I would put in the same bracket. I do remember that last viewing. I mean, I think I even got somewhat depressed in the days afterwards.
I totally understand that. Because Because it is a nihilistic film, isn't it? Like the existentialism of it is fairly nihilistic. And that ending, I mean, the ending where nobody has anything at the end. Even the ideas are dead. The ideas of the film are moribund. Yeah, it's so dark. It's so unpleasant. It leaves you with just an abyss.
Yeah, and I'm very, very glad that the studio possible endings were he managed to.
Yes,
They were shot.
Very pleased. I'm very pleased they aren't in it, because that would have undermined the whole project.
Reuniting her with Stathis.
Oh God, no!
Oh God, yeah, no. She doesn't marry him. You know, he might have turned out to be not as bad as he seemed, but she doesn't marry him. Jesus, come on.
Jesus Christ! I mean, like, oh.
No way. And
thank you.
and Butterfly Baby, I think conceptually I can understand what maybe they were going for, but again it doesn't. And the, I don't know if you've seen that sequence, but also the effects work's too at odds with the effects work elsewhere in the film.
Oh really? No, I haven't seen the sequence.
It's actually a very if it had continuity with the effects work of the rest of the film, it's actually quite a impressive for its time sequence, but it's a piece of stop motion animation.
Okay.
And they decided, because obviously you have the dream where it is that sort of grub or maggot or whatever it is that could, and then she has at the end of the film they shot two, one with her alone in bed and one with Stathis with her, and he's got like a prosthetic hand, and
I wonder what they were thinking.
I have no idea what that is. Such a terrible ending.
Well, thankfully it got rejected. But the Butterfly Baby sequences, she has a dream about like a larvae hatching, and what hatches is a baby with butterfly wings.
Okay.
And it's sort of incandescently coloured, and it looks vaguely cherubic and angelic, and it flies off into the distance. This idea that maybe what might emerge might not be monstrous, maybe it be a development, or but it's one of those. Conceptually I can see where you were going. The problem is, as I said, the effects work doesn't relate at all to the effects work in the rest of the film, because it is a piece of stop motion animation. It's not entirely successful, and the danger, of course, is, as I think Cronenberg even said, is that the audience might have just started giggling, and that's the last thing I needed at that point.
Can you imagine? It would. I mean, that might have killed it.
That's everything crushed then. Everything I've worked towards
might have killed the film.
But he worked very, very hard and was very resilient to make sure that these additional like coders or epilogues weren't included.
Good. I mean, there's the existence of any other scenes. It doesn't need them. It doesn't warrant them. So
no, it doesn't. It feels so perfect. It is one of those films that, with as I say, a couple of missteps here and there, very minor ones, I think. It's one of those films that just feels perfect. It not necessarily it perfect in the sense of being one of the greatest films ever made, but just for what it is, for what it's trying to be and trying to do for its own project. It does it about as well as beyond, actually. It does it better than anybody could ever imagine it being done. And every part functions almost perfectly in coherence with every other part, and it's one of those moments where it all just came together.
Everything fell together. It's one of those wonderful examples of like movie magic, isn't it? It makes you think there's some god or deity presiding, like media, presiding over these projects and bringing everything together.
It was quite a crossover for him as well, wasn't it? Because I remember, again, even though being very young, there was a real big, I'm going to say buzz, a big buzz around.
It's catching.
Was. I mean, the again, rather like Jaws, and its and its tagline. You've got that great tagline. Be afraid, be very afraid.
Very afraid.
It's a very good campaign. Just purely on a marketing angle. The poster art, but there was a lot of anticipation around it. It did generate a lot of, whereas I think people were probably beyond a cult, not really known much about, say, Videodrome or Scanner. the Dead Zone. Or, it does seem to be his like real mainstream moment.
Yeah.
Ironically, considering how in many ways un-mainstream the film is.
It's a very odd beastie in that regard, isn't it?
But I do remember there was just among kids as well, because obviously I'm one. There was there's this film called The Fly, and there was so much talk about it.
Oh yeah, I remember kids talking about this when I was at school.
The playground, even though we couldn't necessarily get to see it, but there was, a real,
It was one of those films that had a sort of legendary status among kids and teens.
Almost immediately, yeah.
Because it was, it's one of the, just on a completely puerile level, it's one of those films where you're like, it's an endurance test, isn't it? It's like, can you stay, can you watch it? Can you stand it?
Yeah.
And of course, kids being kids, they have to mock it in order to sort of rob it of its power.
Of course, yeah.
I remember a kid at school.
That's the defense mechanism, isn't it? That's how you do it, right?
I've literally just remembered this. It's the first time I've thought about this in ages. There was a kid at school who was kind of the class clown, if you know what I mean. And he was actually a very good draftsman. I remember him doing sort of cartoons and caricatures of other kids and teachers and things. And I remember he did this thing where he would get the inside of a Cadbury's cream egg and he would sort of let it drip out of his mouth and he would say, "I'm the fly." Which is funny, and I find it funnier now than I did at the time.
I would find that funny now, quite frankly.
Oh dear.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
I think it's also interesting that when The Simpsons finally
the Treehouse of Horror
they
version.
couldn't parody that version.
Original.
They had to. I mean, how could you parody the 80s one in a cartoon ostensibly for a family audience? You wouldn't be able to do it.
The only element of the 1986 one that's in the Treehouse of Horror version is the pod itself. The pod itself is the same.
It's got the same design, isn't it?
But that's about it. I mean, Homer's got the wonderful line because he buys it from is it Dr. Frank? The resident scientist. He's having a yard sale, and he's selling it for like 35 cents. And Homer says, "It only transports matter."
But again, those designs, by the way, the pod designs are fantastic.
The pod is amazing.
They're very reminiscent of Giga.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this film has already been informed by Alien.
By Alien.
Yeah. But they look ever so slightly insectile, don't they?
They do. They look like the egg sacs that some insects hatch out of, or things like that.
Yes, or just ever so slightly like bees' nests or something, which isn't obviously flies, but it's still, they faintly suggest something insectoid.
They do.
There is something about even the name Brundle kind of suggests that buzzing noise that flies make.
Brundle fly.
Yeah.
It's a very, very insectile name, isn't it? Brundle.
Yeah.
Wow, guys. I mean, this was we've for this series we've done some humdingers, haven't we, thus far? Bloody hell, we've really big, significant films.
It's interesting how much we keep coming back to these same themes, isn't it? Science fiction horror very definitely seems to be about the body, at least on the evidence so far. It's very much about the body and embodiedness and the relationship between bodies and the relationships between bodies and machines. This is the that's even in Quatermass and the Pit. It's not as explicit as it is here either, but exactly. But it's definitely there.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we
see if it's in what we talk about next, whatever that will be.
Yeah. We keep coming back to this other thing, which is this idea of, it's really about the nature of consciousness in terms of, can it be stored? Can it be replicated? Can it be transported from one body to another? That's something we encountered in the old series where we talked about things like the Changeling and the Stone Tape and Ghost Watch and the concentration on media as a site of the uncanny.
Shining,
that's really
of course, the
Shining. Yeah, it's It's really carried through. There's a real emphasis in this film on cassette tapes and videotapes and
Yes.
Oh my God,
camcorders
yes.
these are definitely running themes and anxieties that are
Yeah.
being
Definitely.
they're carrying through into science fiction horror, but in an altered way, if you know what I mean.
I think that's also a really great choice on the part of Cronenberg when he uses the videotape of Brundlefly explaining how he cannot eat as used to it, and then they cut away from how he does it to Stathis' reaction, which of course then preempts what Stathis himself will happen to him when he becomes the star of that video. That's very, very well attuned to the way the media is kind of reflecting itself through the camcorder footage and everything. It's a really great choice. We don't see it until he experiences it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
All you get is that, oh my god, just him reacting to it when she gives him the tape.
There's a couple of moments like that where the film preempts itself as well, symbolically. So there's the bit where Ronnie and Seth, I think it's the first time they're making love, and Seth sits back on a circuit or something, and it embeds in his back.
Yes, now that's really interesting, isn't it? Because that feels like it's there for a plot reason.
Yeah.
But you don't need that. You could have those coarse hairs starting to erupt just from his skin. There doesn't need to be a cut there for that.
No, absolutely not. But I read that as sort of prefiguring what happens to Brundlefly when it goes through the teleporter, and part of the teleporter gets bound up into it.
I think that wound happens before he goes through the teleporter. Doesn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
So it feels obscurely to me like it's almost like if he hadn't been cut, if he hadn't been wounded,
strange, isn't
something else would have happened.
Very peculiar.
I mean, it's infection again, isn't it? It's an open wound.
Open wound. Yeah. There it is.
Actually, that's a point, actually, because he says something like, "Oh, I better put some Bactine on it," and she says something like, "No, I'll just kiss it better," or something.
Yeah.
So it's like,
which is bodily fluids getting into open wounds.
Right.
See, again, I'm not as convinced by Cronenberg's denials about this referring to AIDS.
I agree.
Oh God, Jesus, so much.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, guys, before we start again, because I think we're in danger of going on.
We're off again.
Yeah.
We landed and now we're off again, flying around.
What would you like to... Oh yeah, we've got to get one off before we go. Yes. What would you like to do next, guys?
By the way, this is why I will not eat anything that's had a fly on it for even a second. Because the minute they land, they land,
throwing up on it.
Yeah.
No,
if a fly has landed on it for even a split second, it's in the bin.
On it. Yeah, it's
they've puked on it. Filthy little fuckers. I hate them.
Flies are the most repulsive creatures. They just are, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing, of course. Flies are elemental. They're symbolically elemental. They are symbols of plague, aren't they? They're symbols of disease,
Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies.
Yeah. Absolutely. They're basically demonic, to humans.
That's why I hate this time of year, because we need to get the heat out of our house sometimes. So you open the back door, and I've had to put so many bloody gigantic fly nets up because the buggers are get in. Because you've got to be able to cool down your environment.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in they come.
Yeah.
Wheeling around in that peculiarly repellent, mindless pattern that they have.
It's very particular, isn't it?
Because if one does get in, and I sort of shut all the doors, and I'm trying to usher it towards the wide open door, and I start having conversations with flies saying, "What is wrong with you?
Yes,
you're meant to be an evolved species. How can you not find the airflow out? You're banging your head 20 times against the window."
They are
always go in the wrong fucking direction
every single time. They are bloody stupid creatures.
And there's the definite subspecies or species of fly which is clearly on more sugar than the rest, because it's just darting around at right angles to itself, and also say, for God's sake, and some are like curiously slow and
ponderous. Yeah.
Those big sort of fat noisy ones are horrible, but I don't mind them as much as the little regular houseflies. The little regular houseflies, there's just something about them. They're almost, because the big fat furry ones, they're disgusting, but they do seem like animals somehow.
Yeah.
Normal houseflies are like living dirt, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. The thing is, because I'm a terrible vegetarian, I still catch them. I literally use a piece of card and an old glass, and I can't catch them and push them out.
I'm the reactionary in this room then, because I kill the fuckers.
Mind you, 1 year I had to, because we live quite well. I don't know if you get this problem, Jack. I assume you do, because I live sort of semi-rurally. You can get problems with mice and rats at times, and we've had them in the past. I mean, we've had lucky years so far, but have had to deal with rats in the past. And of course, then you get a fly infestation problem, and 1 year was just terrible. Yeah, so I'm glad we didn't watch the film that year.
Yeah,
I would not be going to bed.
Anyway, sorry, George, you were trying to wrap up.
Sorry. Yeah, no problem. I was just saying, what would you guys like to do next?
Ooh.
Yeah. If we're continuing the theme.
Yeah.
I mean, we did talk about doing The Thing.
Well, it does seem like the obvious next step.
It does seem like the obvious one.
Yeah. Well, I'm completely delighted to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Any excuse to watch The Thing again.
Yeah. I'm always happy to watch The Thing. I think
any excuse.
About 4 years ago, maybe last time. That's a good enough chunk of time.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And again, I mean, like, fantastic. I mean, bloody hell, it's so good. It's so good. Apex filmmaking.
Yes.
I mean, we'll talk about it, but the first time I saw that, my jaw was on the fucking floor. I was like, what am I watching?
What is going on? You know,
there was a big hiatus between watching a chunk of the film and then watching it to completion, because I had a sneak. I literally snuck up to my cousin's room. This cousin who's 10 years older than me, so he was a teenager, and he had The Thing on VHS, and I put it on, and it was the point where they do the paddles.
Oh, brilliant! What a point to watch!
No, I got to that point, and then I screamed, and
not surprised.
Off went the tape, and then I got caught. I shouldn't have been in them. And then it was years later before I saw the complete picture.
Wow. Brilliant.
But as you say, it's that peep into the abyss again. It's the kids thinking that they can endure and do the endurance test. And
that is not a film to do an endurance test for kids.
No, it really
wasn't. Not. It really isn't. Well, yeah. Shall we pencil that one in then? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Fantastic. Very Marvelous. Pleased about that. And before we go, guys, anything to throw out there into the ether?
Well, I'll just go quickly. We're still a couple of weeks away from launch on the new podcast that Vicky and I are doing. So I'll do more details as and when, because we wanted just to get a couple more episodes in the bank. So we've always got we're never going to have a problem, basically, if something gets in the way. But we wanted 8. We're nearly there.
Excellent. Stay tuned, guys. Stay tuned. I'll put out like a bulletin closer to when it's going to be released and everything.
Thank you so much.
We'll get people flocking over there, because I know a lot of my audience love Bowie.
Great.
So
thank you. That's much appreciated.
No problem at all.
And then other than that, just the usual. If somehow not bored of my voice already, you can go to the big bad place that Mr. Bezos owns, or Audible, and dig out anything I might have narrated or produced. If you're so mad.
Not including, what was it? Wokeness is killing Britain or something that you...
What? Oh,
that was
bloody
this
hell.
week.
Jesus Christ. Wow.
I came back
Or
from
should
the
I
holiday.
not talk about that? I don't know.
No, it's fine. I mean, literally no one, I think, in our audience is going to be connected to that particular situation. No, I got back from my holiday, and I was so thrilled because it was like, oh, great. I've got a job to come back to, and it's narration. And of the two jobs I do, narration and producing, the narration does pay the better money. So I thought, great, brilliant. I can pay for the holiday I've just had. And then I said, hang on, you want me to do a piece by the Free Speech Union? Oh God, no.
Oh Jesus,
absolutely
God.
fucking not.
Yeah.
But I would, at least on the other hand,
it's Toby Young's boondoggle,
right.
that, isn't it?
God,
yeah. Oh
almighty.
God.
Wow.
So it was a big fat no. And I thought, well, I obviously must have some principles somewhere because, I could always do with the money. But it's like, no, I'm not sucking on Satan's cock for them. The only joy I got was I had to be obviously more diplomatic in my email, is that the email has to go to the publisher and has to go to because the writer actually selected me.
Oh, really? How bizarre, right?
Because this is it. Because as always, these things, publishers and authors get presented with a number of voices that could potentially be the narrator, and the author actually personally selected me. Okay. And I was like, well, no.
Yeah.
Your judgment is as good there as it is everywhere else.
Everywhere else, yes.
I mean, in terms of appropriateness, not in terms of talent, obviously.
Yeah. No, you're quite right. So no, it was. But then there's the sheer disappointment of going, I've got a job. Oh no, I haven't.
Yeah. Also, I mean, like,
you got to. I tell you, I'm envious. You got a lovely sort of, fuck you moment. That's a real lovely sort of self-righteous and an earned one as well.
Yeah, very much
flouncing out of the office, you can't fire me, I quit moment. You treasure that one.
In fairness to my studio, they were very sweet because they said, we actually all had a discussion and we said the chances of Elliot taking this job are so fucking remote.
Did they lay odds?
They said, but it's not for us to make that call, and it had to be, said, but we all did look at each other and go, oh, my reputation precedes me.
Yeah.
We got some jobs for you, Elliot. Some books for you to read. What we got here? We got Lawrence Fox, Nigel Farage, J.K. Rowling.
Well, I think I'm getting Hillbilly
the novelization of God's Not Dead.
Yeah, Hillbilly Elegy is in the post, so I think I'm doing that next. All my eyeliners on stamp.
Dear.
So pleased to see that nobody turned up to that auditorium a few days ago for JD Vance.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, that's hilarious, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely hilarious. Oh, the fact that he just becomes such a liability to...
Yeah, to the point, he may have actually influenced the fall of Auburn. I mean that's fabulous, isn't it? God, we need to get him talking for reform over here, don't we? We have to pay him.
Well, the trouble with that theory, it does look good. Sort of Vance kills everything he comes into contact with. It does look good, except that he spends so much time around Trump. Why isn't Trump dead yet?
Yeah, it's a fair point. Yeah.
Well, of course, geographically, he doesn't spend that much time around Trump because presumably Trump can't stand to be around him and keeps sending him off on these sojourns.
But it's a rare thing on which Trump and I agree then, because I genuinely cannot stand that man. It's that constant laugh talking that he does. Everything is whenever he answers a question, he always starts with the first name of the person he's talking to, and he's always got this big shit-eating grin on his face, and he always does everything through this constant laugh talking. It's like fingernails on a chalkboard in hell. To me,
it's grifter speak. It's a trick. It's a
mind you, I am guilty of laugh speaking, but that's because
but it's genuine. It's genuine in your case.
Energy.
But
with him, it's all fake.
Oh, it's
He's
all
like the
fake,
Heath
yeah.
Ledger Joker. He plans everything
Yeah.
he does 6 weeks in advance.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all designed for effect. Everything is designed for effect. And he's not even very good at it. That's the thing. Just like all of these chills and grifters, he's not even very good at what he does.
Everything that's come out of the mouth, every crazy diabolical thing that comes out of the mouth of whether it's a Hegseth or a Miller or a Levitt or any of them, Trump obviously, even I was still blindsided this week when he Vance answered a question, the proudest achievement I think I've contributed towards in this administration is pulling funds from Ukraine. And you're like, whoa, well, we know you must think that, but to sell that so brazenly, and to a European audience, which is really, I was lost. I was like, okay, that's interesting to put. Not Doge, obviously that was a complete failure, but on by any metric, even their own. But like of all the things, that was the thing you pulled as being your proudest achievement as being part of the administration. Yeah, we pulled all those funds from Ukraine. That's how do you sell that?
It is a moment. Yeah, it is a moment when you just want the universe to become, just in that instant, a Looney Tunes cartoon, and you just want an anvil to drop on him from nowhere.
Yeah. But that's an unfathomable statement on every level.
It is. Yeah.
You just can't quite get. Yeah. That's just the id speaking.
They don't live in reality. They don't.
No,
it's some other world that they live in.
Well, that cliche, isn't it, of every accusation's a confession, really is true. That he just went right to the confession of the darkest part of him.
Escalatingly true. If they say
he might as well
anything,
just have said, "We'd really like to see Russia win that war."
Yeah, if they say anything, if they accuse the other side of anything or anyone of anything, it's a confession at this point. It's a total confession.
Although I think he's desperate to be excommunicated at the moment. Excommunicated.
He's trying everything to put distance between himself and the Iran war because he knows the base hates it. And he's labouring under the delusion that he has a cat's chance in hell of getting the nomination.
Yeah, that's what he's thinking. That's what he's thinking. It's undoubtedly what he's thinking. And he's probably seeing that Trump is losing it now. He's really starting to lose his base. So it's like, opportunity.
Yeah, it is going to be so nice when Trump dies, and I don't just mean because he'll be dead, which will of course be great.
Yes, that will be very, very good for humanity in general.
It will also be so much fun watching the whole House of Cards collapse the minute he's not there, because he is as utterly ridiculous as he is the only thing holding it up.
Yes,
and the minute he's gone, they will fall upon each other like ravening wolves. It will be like the Diadochi after the death of Alexander, except stupid. They will just instantly start feeding on each other like monsters of the deep. Every single one of them will be fighting each other. And it's gonna be delightful to watch.
It's already started happening. The base is already falling away.
Oh yeah.
They're as venal and as narcissistic and stupid as they always were, and it's all about them, and like, I voted for Trump 3 times, but now I know better.
But the thing is,
fuck you.
For years now, they've all been in this thing that I call the Trump trap, which is that for the Republican Party now, Trump came along at just the right moment for the Republican Party because it was dying on the vine. They couldn't win elections without vote suppression and gerrymandering. And they needed somebody to come along who would just somehow paper over all the contradictions in the right-wing coalition in America. And lo and behold, because, we live in hell world, he turned up. And it was a completely unique, whatever else you want to say about him, a completely unique individual, literally the only person on the planet that could have done it. And he turned up and he did it, and he gave them almost a decade of uninterrupted electoral success that they, in real material terms, they had no reason to expect or get, right? And he is still the only thing holding that coalition together. And they're all in what I call the Trump trap, which is that in order to get elected, in order to get selected to win primaries, to get to run for offices, they need the support of the Republican base, and a huge chunk of that is just undone. Even now, when his support is at its lowest, a huge chunk of it is just ride or die for Trump. You'll never separate them. Whatever he does, he could strip naked in public, masturbate himself to completion, sacrifice an infant to Satan in public. They wouldn't desert him. We're talking about people like that.
True, yeah.
That's like 20-30% of the Republican base. So they need these people to get primaries, to win primaries. They need them to win elections in these congressional districts and in the purple states and places like that. The trouble is, when they do what they have to do to get the support of those people and Trump's support so that he doesn't tell those people not to vote for them, they also alienate huge swathes of other people, including loads of other people in their own electoral coalition. And they've been, to varying degrees, they've all been in this trap and trying to negotiate this trap for, as I say, almost 10 years now. And it's the wonderful thing is, when he's gone, when he's dead, they're still going to be in it, because MAGA, the MAGA core will still be there. It'll deify the dead Trump, and it'll talk about him and think about him as if he's still alive. It'll treat him as it does now, as a proto-religious figure.
Some of them, I swear to God, will believe that he'll come back. I swear to fucking God, I mean, some of them will.
QAnon is a proto-religion, but for years, 5 years, 10 years after he's dead, they will still be in that Trump trap where they need to keep catering to the Trumpist core, and at the same time, by doing that, they alienate huge chunks of other people.
Yeah,
glibly, I say, why wait? Let's crucify him now and bury him behind a rock and see if he comes back.
Yeah, exactly. Let's test this hypothesis. Let's go. But
I mean, it's one of the only things you can be thankful for is quirk of time, that this is a man who was not a president in his 50s and 60s, but now near 80. I mean, that's the only thing you can cling to as being light at the end of the tunnel, you know.
The only reason any of this happened is because Barack Obama was elected.
Yes, and that's frustrating, because the idea of having to read this as a kind of pop psychology, personal grudge narrative is deeply crappy. It's like, well, that's not really how history works. Oh God, maybe it did this time. You know.
We shouldn't have to be. We shouldn't have to have politics, geopolitics, based on the personal neuroses of two or three people. But we do, because that's the world we live in.
Hang on, we've got a perfectly adequate nuclear deal with Iran. Yeah, but Barack Obama signed it, so I'm tearing it up.
Yeah, that's no good. It's got the N-word signature on it.
Yeah.
That's what all this is about. He saw a good-looking, charming, popular, intelligent black man, whatever else you want to say about Barack Obama, and I've plenty of criticism.
Say a lot.
He saw that man, and he saw him win 2 elections and be the president. And Donald Trump, who is just Iago but thick, he looked at him and he thought, that's not right. You shouldn't have that when I haven't got it. That's not how it's supposed to be. It's like that line in Monte Cristo. It is not right that you, the son of a sailor or whatever Edmond Dante's father is, should have more than I, the son of a nobleman. He just looked at it and he said, no, that the universe is fundamentally ontologically wrong if Barack Obama is in the White House. This is all about mending that fundamental bruise. This is why it works, because Trump's narcissism melds perfectly with white supremacy, and that makes him the electoral prospect for the base that he is.
Yes,
because that's what it's all about. It's all white supremacy right the way down. White supremacy right the way down.
And also, it reflects their narcissism, doesn't it? That's what he does. Exactly. He justifies their narcissism and he enshrines it. He makes it so that, you're not bad people. You're actually the good people, and everything that's been enshrined as good is not good. You know, it's that weird trick that they play, that semantic trick.
And your every mean, petty, cruel, spiteful, vicious, selfish impulse is actually good and Christian and moral
and, right
and noble.
And correct. Yeah. It's wow. It's
pathetic. The war on empathy.
It's pathetic.
There's all these people.
It's dumb.
There's all these people surrounding him, Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance, and they all think they're going to be the one who will take over. They all think, when I'm the heir apparent.
The base is going to eat them alive.
None of them is. There is no heir apparent.
It's going to tear them to bits. They just don't have it. Whatever it is Trump has got, they don't have it.
Well, the one
primary for the nomination is going to be huge, and it's going to be a catalogue of no-hopers.
Yeah.
I mean, none of them had a reality TV show, and none of them were an iconic figure for 25 years before they even had that. You know, those are factors. That's not all that's made Trump the phenomena that he is, but those are obvious factors. These people are still going to be seen very much as politicians, even if they're former Fox contributors like Keg's Breath. That you know, they're not going to be seen in the same way. They're not going to have that reach, and they're. I mean, Trump is peculiar, but they are different shades of peculiar.
Yeah. The danger is, of course, that the chaos and the overstuffed ballot and the catalogue of no-hopers, it opens up an avenue for somebody truly
worse,
terrifying,
right?
like
someone who's
Tucker
competent.
Carlson or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or an actual ideological fascist.
Someone who is evil and competent. That's...
I mean, as long as you've got
worst.
this situation where you know, the Democrats, the mainstream Democrats are more sort of concerned, I don't know, by Hassan Piker than they are about Trump. You've got every chance of say a Tucker or a Candace Owens being able to provide the radical voice, but from the far right.
Exactly.
That's the danger.
That's the real danger, right?
I
And
mean,
while the
when you even
Democrats
have-
are going around like suppressing people who are even as centrist as like Bernie Sanders, it's like,
well, don't forget, we've even had
yeah.
Omar come out today, and she said, "Oh, you know, effectively the enemy of my enemy is my friend." It's like no, because she trying to sort of triangulate with what Tucker Carlson. Like,
They
Tucker
always
Carlson
do it, don't they?
The enemy of your enemy is not your friend.
No,
They are
exactly,
not.
exactly. We can't. But it's such a
They never get it.
Democrat way to go about things, isn't it? You know, it's
it's why they handed Trump the election last time round. You know, they handed it him gratis. They just handed it right to him. I don't know. I'm always surprised that people were surprised that he won.
It's going to be fascinating to see the books written about the Democrat, the upper echelons of the Democratic Party, the malaise that the fug that they've been in for the last few years, where they continually think of everything through, or see everything through the lens of the legitimacy of things like POTUS or SCOTUS or Congress. And it's like, you have not, willingly or unwillingly, not factored in the moment you're in at all. You're just still running on ideas of procedure.
Right. They see things as, they always seem to see things as business as usual. That's it. That's it. And it's this assumption that's like from the early 2000s. They think that that's how our politics still operates. Nothing
Ironically,
changes.
it operates in a way that our unwritten constitution works, which is awfully good chapism. It actually it is truer over there across the pond.
Yes. Yeah. This is what
you have a
Trump,
written constitution, you know.
This is what this second Trump government in particular has really revealed about America, is that so much of what for decades was its normal functioning, its normal government functioning, just relied almost completely upon this kind of unspoken gentleman's agreement not to abuse the whole
Everyone's a good chap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I mean, if one thing has come out of it, it is how all the checks and balances, the Constitution, the statutes, everything, they are not built for purpose.
Yeah,
it's just been exposed to the world that
they
these
have the
things
most
are
ridiculous
fragile.
government system.
It's
Their government system is just ludicrous.
Yes,
And
it relied
power
upon
concentrated in one person. Even allowing for the sheer number of executive orders that have been carried out, even for allowing for the fact that actually the president shouldn't have these things, but Trump has been uniquely able to transgress them. Even allowing for how other presidents operate, it's still too much power in the hands of one person. It's not spread.
The legislative branch in America has been ceding power to the executive for decades now. So, you know, you have a fundamental problem in the design of the system, and then you have decades of that process. And then you have the arrival of somebody like Trump, who is just, you know, he doesn't know the word scruple, you know.
Right. Doesn't care, and is probably insane. Right, that's the other thing. It's the assumption of sanity in these people. That's the big problem, right?
Well, this is the disadvantage the Democrats have dealing with the Republicans. The Democrats still know what their actual job is. The Republicans have tactically forgotten. The Republicans have forgotten that they're supposed to be, you know, part of the system for preserving and administering American capitalism and American imperialism. The Democrats still understand that that's their job, to be administrators of American capitalist
Yes.
imperialism. The Republicans don't know that anymore. They don't understand that anymore. They've forgotten. They've talked themselves out of that. They believe this civilizational, deranged fascist conspiracy theory that they've been telling their base to get them to vote for them for years. They've talked themselves into believing their own nonsense.
Yeah.
The Democrats still have no idea what they're dealing with.
No, they don't. They haven't for decades. Let's be honest. Apart from one or two, maybe individuals, outliers, they have no concept. No concept.
And even they compromise and capitulate so quickly.
Way too much. Yeah.
So fast. And then,
Anywho, Jack.
Anyway,
anything you want to throw out
my
there?
plugs. Yeah.
Just had a mini episode of IDS there, right?
IDGS, IDSG.
IDSG, exactly.
Get my acronyms right.
Yeah.
My podcast, I Don't Speak. It's an experimental podcast. We put out, an hour and a half of complete silence.
The John Cage podcast.
So I don't speak German is the main thing I do. I also write at Eruditorium Press. You can find links to everything I do at my Bluesky, which is at Times Carcass, and I have a Patreon. Give me $1 a month, get access to everything. Oh, and I never mentioned this, but I have a YouTube channel where I put up my own little homemade audiobooks of various things, and that's me.
Brilliant. Links below, by the way, guys. And I'll also put up the link to the Bluesky to the Bowie podcast as well, Elliot.
Oh, yeah.
For now. Yeah.
That'd be lovely.
No problem. As for me, guys, you can find me here on Exaggerated Elegy, where there are more podcasts like this and video game Let's Plays, links to all of my published work, short story collections over at strangeplaygrounds.com and at the Evil Empire of Amazon. Just type in George Daniel Lee and you'll find my my author page there. Non-fiction over at Ginger Nuts of Horror, the ongoing My Life in Horror series. There's a couple out there at the moment. The Frankenstein essay, which I'm really, really proud of, which took me a very long time to get right. And I think that's it for me for now. I mean, Jesus, guys, this was amazing. This one, Jesus God. Again, it's a bit like Alien. You could just go on, couldn't you?
Yeah.
You could just go on forever. But I have a funny feeling the Thing might be the same.
Well, the Thing, certainly. Nothing to talk about there.
Oh, no. That's not a film about ideas at all. Like, at all.
Be shitting me.
And on that note, bye-bye.
Take care.
Buzz.